The first thing I heard on my first night at the Great Zombie History Museum was a chain dragging across concrete. I was standing in the public section with a trash bag in one hand and a broom in the other. The museum had closed 20 minutes earlier. The parking lot was empty. The front doors were locked, and the only other employee in sight was Martin, the night supervisor. The sound came from behind a steel door at the end of the main hall. Something scraped across the floor on the other side. The chain pulled tight. Then a heavy body struck the door hard enough to shake the handle. Martin kept walking. "You'll get used to that," he said. I followed him past the door and tried to keep my eyes on the trash cans. At that point, I still believed the museum used recordings and machines to make the exhibits feel real after dark. I'd seen enough haunted houses to know how much noise a speaker hidden behind a wall could make. The Great Zombie History Museum sits outside Youngstown, Ohio, close enough to the state line that it gets visitors from Ohio and Pennsylvania. Almost everyone who grows up in that part of the country hears about the Great Zombie Plague of 1923. Schools cover it for a few days in history class. Old families still keep rifles and tools that their grandparents used during the outbreak. Several towns have monuments listing the names of people who never came home. The version taught in school is simple. The first infected people appeared near Youngstown during the spring of 1923. The sickness moved through farms, mills, and mining towns. Local police lost control within a week. The governor called in the National Guard. By the end of summer, the last large group of infected had been destroyed, and the roads opened again. Now, most books stop there. The museum tells the longer version. During the day, the place looks like a large roadside attraction. The main building resembles an old brick train station. A rusted military truck sits near the entrance, and a tall iron fence surrounds the back of the property. Families come to see rifles, axes, farm tools, medical equipment, and photographs from the plague. There is a rebuilt farmhouse in the center of the public hall and a full-size wagon that once carried infected bodies out of Youngstown. I applied for a night maintenance position because the pay was almost twice what other museums offered. The listing asked for someone willing to work from 8 at night till 4 in the morning. My duties included cleaning the public exhibits, moving supplies, helping with feed deliveries, and reporting problems to security. The word feed caught my attention, but I assumed the museum kept a few farm animals for demonstrations. Martin interviewed me in a small office near the gift shop. He was in his late 50s and had worked at the museum for more than 20 years. He asked whether I followed written instructions, whether I could stay calm during an alarm, and whether the sight of blood made me sick. I answered yes to the first 2 questions and no to the third, and he hired me before I left the building. My first shift began the next Monday. Martin showed me the public galleries, while the final visitors made their way toward the gift shop. We passed a display of homemade armor built from stove doors, a case filled with bullets dug out of a farmhouse wall, and several jars holding teeth removed from infected people. The largest exhibit was devoted to a farmer named Rambo. It included a saddle, a damaged rifle, a section of a burned wagon, and a handwritten journal opened beneath thick glass. A painted scene beneath the display showed Rambo standing on a road near Lake Tomahawk, while boats carried families across the water. I'd heard his name before, but only as part of a lesson in school. Martin said we would return to the exhibit later. At 8 o'clock, he locked the front doors and checked every restroom and gallery. Then he led me to the steel door at the end of the main hall. The sign above it read "Authorized Employees Only, Live Historical Collection." Martin entered a code into a panel. Several locks opened inside the door. "Stay beside me until we finish the tour," he began. "Don't touch anything unless I tell you." He pulled the door open. The air behind it smelled like bleach, raw meat, and old dirt. A concrete hallway extended through the center of a windowless wing. White lights covered the ceiling. Red lines had been painted across the floor at regular points along both walls. 12 human figures stood in separate concrete spaces behind heavy steel rails. Each one wore a collar connected to the wall. Chains also held them. Some wore torn work clothes from the 1920s. Others had been dressed in simple gray uniforms. The nearest figure turned toward me. Its skin had dried against its face. Several teeth showed through a hole in one cheek. It pulled once against the chain around its neck, then reached through the bars. I stepped backward. Martin closed the steel door behind us. "The public sees photographs and replicas. This is where we keep the original collection," he said. The infected people in that wing had been captured during the plague. Their bodies continued to decay, but at a rate that made no medical sense. Several had been held by the museum since it opened. A few had been transferred from military storage sites after the government stopped funding them. At the far end of the wing, 3 reinforced kennels held infected dogs. A glass security room overlooked the entire hallway. 2 smaller steel doors led to medical rooms, and safe rooms had been built at every major corner. Martin handed me a laminated card. 5 numbered instructions were printed on it. "Keep this on you. Every employee carries one. The wording has changed a little over the years, but the meaning hasn't." I started reading. Martin put his hand over the card. "We go through them one at a time," he began. "You learn where each one applies before you worry about the next." He removed his hand and pointed toward the public section. We returned to the Farmer Rambo exhibit first. Rule 1. Always put your cows inside before dark. Martin stopped in front of the glass case and asked me to read the first line on the card. "Always put your cows inside before dark?" I said. I looked through the public hall toward the rebuilt farmhouse. The museum owned no livestock. The grounds behind the building were covered by pavement, gravel, and fenced storage yards. There was no pasture and no barn large enough to hold cattle. "Are there cows somewhere else?" I asked. "No," Martin began. "There haven't been cows on this property since the museum opened." He pointed to the journal beneath the glass. The rule came from Farmer Rambo. In 1923, Rambo owned a small farm near Lake Tomahawk, southeast of Youngstown. His stone barn stood above the road leading toward the water. During the first weeks of the plague, several families left their homes and camped near the lake because they believed the infected would stay close to the towns. Rambo stayed on his farm with his wife, his brother, and 17 cattle. The entries in his journal began as ordinary farm records. He wrote down how much feed he used, when a calf was born, and which fences needed repair. After the plague reached the area, the entries changed. He recorded groups of infected people moving along the roads. He counted gunshots from neighboring farms. He also described how his cattle behaved before the infected appeared. The cows always noticed them first. They stopped eating. They raised their heads and faced the same direction. If the infected came closer, the animals crowded against the far side of the pasture and began calling. The sound carried across the hills. Rambo discovered that the infected followed it. A single frightened cow could draw them away from a road. A whole herd could bring down every infected person in the area to one farm. On a warm evening in June, Rambo saw his cattle staring toward a line of trees to the west. The road was empty, and the woods looked clear from the farmhouse. He still moved all 17 cows into the stone barn. He covered the small windows, packed cloth around the door, and left one lantern burning inside so the animals would settle down. His neighbor, who kept a larger herd in the next valley, left his cattle outside. The first cows began calling before sunset. Rambo climbed onto the roof of his barn and saw infected people coming through the trees. There were only a few at first. As the cattle panicked, more shapes appeared on the road and along the fence lines. The infected entered the neighboring pasture. The herd broke through a gate and ran toward the lake road. Their bellows brought infected people from several directions. By the time the light faded, the animals and the infected had formed one moving mass headed toward the families camped near Lake Tomahawk. Rambo rode ahead of them. He reached the lake with enough time to warn the families. There were several fishing boats tied near the shore, but not enough room to move everyone at once. Rambo and a group of local men blocked the road while women and children crossed the water. The museum's display showed the last part of the defense. Rambo and the others pushed an empty wagon across the road and filled it with hay, lamp oil, and broken furniture. They set it on fire when the infected came down the hill. The burning wagon stopped the cattle and divided the swarm. Rambo fired from behind a stone wall until the final boat left shore. His rifle broke during the fight. The cracked stock in the glass case still carried dark marks from his hands. Rambo survived. His brother did too. The stone barn held, and all 17 cows were still alive when he returned the next morning. The neighboring herd was gone. Martin opened a drawer beneath the exhibit and removed a copy of Rambo's journal. Several pages had the same sentence written at the top. "Put the cows inside before dark." Rambo had written it after each report of a nearby attack. He passed the warning to the other farms, and it became one of the first rules shared by people who survived the plague. "Why keep it on the employee card?" I asked. "The museum was founded by survivors," Martin began. "They decided no rule would be removed just because it stopped being convenient. People forgot plenty after 1923. We don't help them forget the rest." He placed the journal copy back in its drawer. The first rule had no effect on my work. I lived in an apartment and had never owned an animal larger than a dog. The museum had no cows, and none of my duties took me near a pasture. But I still learned the story. Every few weeks, Martin asked me what Rambo had noticed before the swarm arrived. Visitors sometimes laughed when they saw small signs in the gift shop that said, "Put your cows inside." The museum sold them beside toy rifles and Farmer Rambo figures. Rule 2. Never step past the red lines in the live containment wing. Martin introduced the second rule when we returned to the live wing. The red lines ran across the concrete in front of every human enclosure. Some formed straight boundaries from wall to wall. Others curved around steel posts or feeding doors. Each line was 4 inches wide and bright enough to see under the emergency lights. "Your feet stay on this side," Martin began. "So do your hands, your tools, and anything attached to you." Each human zombie had 4 restraints. A collar held the upper body close to the back wall. Wrist chains limited the arms. An ankle chain connected to a steel ring set into the floor. A second cable ran from the collar to another point in the wall. The red line marked the farthest point the infected person could reach when every restraint was pulled tight. Martin told me the measurements included an extra foot of space. The chains were checked every morning and again before the public sections closed. Security watched the wing through cameras and thick glass. Even with those protections, employees had been injured. Metal stretched. Bolts shifted inside old concrete. A wrist could slip out of a cuff after enough skin wore away. The infected also tested their restraints whenever they saw something worth reaching. Their speed caused most of the accidents. Some of the zombies stood in the same position for hours. Their heads hung forward. Their arms rested at their sides. A new employee could work beside one for an entire shift and believe it had become too weak to move. The second something crossed that line, though, it lunged. During my first week, I cleaned the containment hallway with another maintenance worker named Joel. He'd been at the museum for 7 months and knew the wing better than I did. He showed me which drains clogged, which lights flickered, and which zombies reacted most strongly to cleaning chemicals. One of the oldest infected people had been a steel worker near Youngstown. A faded tag above his enclosure identified him as Collection Number 7. He wore dark work pants and one heavy boot. The other foot had been worn down against the concrete after decades of pulling on his ankle chain. Number 7 never followed me with his eyes. He stood with his face pointed toward the floor and his hands hanging near his knees. On my 4th night, I mopped the hallway beside his enclosure. A dark mark near the bars would not come off. I pushed the mop forward and leaned into the handle. The wet end slid across the red paint. Number 7 grabbed it before I could pull back. His head came up, and both arms shot through the bars. The wrist chains snapped tight. He pulled the mop hard enough to drag me one step forward. I released the handle. The mop disappeared between the rails and struck the back wall. Number 7 bit through the wet cloth, then twisted the metal handle until it bent. Joel hit the call button on the wall. Martin arrived with a long steel hook used to recover objects from inside the enclosures. He waited until Number 7 dropped the handle, caught it with the hook, and pulled it out. The metal had deep tooth marks near the middle. "That one was new," Joel said. Martin looked at me. "Did any part of you cross the line?" No, just the mop," I said. "Good. Then the museum just lost a mop," Martin replied. He carried the damaged handle to security and wrote an incident report. I expected a warning or a lecture. Instead, he returned with another mop and told me to finish the hallway from farther back. The following night, I noticed several thin lines in the concrete around Number 7's enclosure. Some were old scratches from the ankle chain. One crossed beneath a faded strip of red paint and ended several inches beyond it. The current red line had been painted farther away. Joel explained that the boundary had moved 3 times. Years earlier, Number 7's floor ring had pulled partly out of the concrete. He reached beyond the line and caught an employee's tool belt. The man escaped after the belt tore, but the museum added more space around every enclosure. The old marks remained visible beneath the paint. After losing the mop, I treated each red line like a wall. If a rag, key, or bottle rolled past one, I called security. The recovery hooks hung at several points in the wing, but only Martin and the guards were allowed to use them. Joel followed the rule most of the time. He'd worked around the infected long enough to judge the reach of each chain. When he cleaned, his shoes sometimes touched the edge of the paint. He also leaned over the boundary to read restraint numbers or look behind the rails. I warned him twice during my first month. "I'm on this side," Joel said the first time. "Your shoulder isn't," I replied. Joel stepped back and continued working. The second time, he dropped a roll of paper towels near an empty examination pen. He caught it before it crossed the line, then held it up and smiled. "Still got it," Joel said. Martin saw him from the security room and made him watch another training video. The museum kept replacement tools in a storage closet beside the live wing. At the beginning of each shift, I counted the mops, scrub brushes, radios, and key rings. We could replace every item in that closet before sunrise. The count mattered because the infected used anything they could. A zombie could swing a broom handle through the bars. It could wrap a cord around a wrist. Number 7 once kept a radio for 2 days and crushed it whenever an employee came close. I gave the red lines more room than they required. That slowed my work, but it kept all of me outside the enclosures. Rule 3. Feed the zombie dogs until they are completely full. The 3 dogs were kept at the far end of the live wing, behind 2 sets of steel doors. All 3 had been infected during the original plague. Their records identified them as farm dogs, recovered from different counties. The smallest had once belonged to a family outside Youngstown. The other 2 had been found near abandoned barns after the National Guard cleared the area. Age had changed them. Their coats had fallen out in patches, and their bodies looked too thin for the strength they carried. The largest dog had a wide head and a strip of dark fur along its back. Its cloudy eyes tracked every person who passed that kennel. Martin called it Big Red because that was the name written on the tag found around its neck. Each kennel had a main gate, an inner safety gate, and a sliding feeding compartment. Employees placed raw meat inside the compartment, closed the outer panel, and pulled a handle that opened the inner side. The dogs never had direct access to the person feeding them. On my first feeding shift, Martin rolled 3 metal buckets into the kennel room. They were filled with beef, chicken, and pieces of organs from a local meat supplier. "A normal dog gets a measured portion," "These dogs eat until they stop," he said. He fed the smallest dog first. It swallowed every piece without chewing. The second dog ate more slowly, but stayed beside the feeding door. Big Red finished its first bucket and struck the inner panel with its head. Martin opened an emergency container and continued feeding it. The dog ate until its belly pressed close to the concrete. Then it walked in a circle, lowered itself onto the floor, and closed its eyes. "That's when you stop," Martin said. The amount changed from night to night. Temperature, noise, and activity in the human wing could make the dogs hungrier. A feeding chart listed a minimum amount for each animal, but the numbers were only a starting point. A hungry, infected dog did not conserve its body. It bit the bars until teeth broke. It dug until its claws came off. It struck doors hard enough to split the skin around its shoulders. Pain slowed a living dog. These animals continued until they reached food or damaged the kennel. A full infected dog became heavy and slow. Once it fell asleep, security can inspect the bolts and clean the outer parts of the kennel. I helped with the feedings 3 nights a week. The smell stayed on my gloves and uniform, so I changed before returning to the public section. Big Red learned the sound of the bucket cart. It began scratching the kennel door as soon as the wheels entered the wing. During my second week, a storm delayed the meat delivery. The truck was supposed to arrive at 6 in the evening. At 8:30, it was still somewhere west of Youngstown. The dogs had eaten that morning, but their night feeding was already late. The smallest dog paced along the back wall. The second chewed at the edge of its feeding panel. Big Red threw its full weight against the main gate every few minutes. The impacts carried through the concrete hull. Martin called the driver and learned that a fallen tree had blocked the road. Security brought out the emergency supply, but the freezer held only enough meat for part of a normal feeding. We divided it among the kennels. The smallest dog lay down. The second settled near the back wall. Big Red remained beside the gate and watched me through the bars. Its stomach looked full, and it had eaten more than the minimum amount on the cart. I rolled the empty buckets toward the wash station. Big Red struck the gate. A lower bolt shifted in its bracket. The bottom corner of the gate moved outward by less than an inch. The dog hit it again. The gap widened. Big Red pushed its nose against the opening and scraped one paw under the steel. Martin was in the human wing. I reached for the wall radio, then saw the red emergency bucket mounted beside the wash station. It contained frozen meat reserved for a kennel failure. I pulled it down and carried it to the feeding compartment. Big Red stopped pushing at the gate when the outer panel opened. I dropped in several pieces, closed the panel, and moved the handle. The dog turned from the gap and swallowed the meat. Then it returned to the gate. I fed it again. The dog continued pacing between the compartment and the loose bolt. I used the entire emergency bucket. Big Red's stomach expanded, but its eyes stayed on me. Security arrived outside the kennel room. The guards could not repair the gate while the dog was moving. One of them brought 2 more containers from a medical freezer. I kept feeding Big Red. The dog slowed after the second container. It stood beside the compartment and waited instead of running back to the gate. After several more pieces, it walked to the center of the kennel and lay down. Its eyes remained open. I pushed in another piece. Big Red raised its head, ate, and lowered its chin to the floor. The cloudy eyes closed. Martin entered the room and checked the animal from behind the outer safety gate. Then security locked a steel plate over the damaged corner and replaced the bolt. The repair took 12 minutes. Big Red slept through it. When the delivery truck finally arrived, Martin ordered a second full feeding. He said the long delay could leave the dogs hungry again before morning. I asked how an animal could eat that much after nearly 100 years. "We don't know where it goes," Martin began. "The Army studied them for decades. The museum stopped asking that question when funding ended." The kennel floor beneath Big Red had no waste drain. The infected dogs rarely passed anything after eating. Their bodies took in meat and kept moving. After the storm, I stopped using the feeding chart as an ending point. I watched each dog. If one continued pacing, scratching, or following me with its eyes, I brought more food. The feeding ended when all three lay down and closed their eyes. Several employees complained that we wasted meat. Martin kept the invoices from every repaired kennel in a folder beside the freezer. One bent gate cost more than months of extra food. The following week, Big Red was moved to a new enclosure with 4 lower bolts. The old gate remained in a storage room. Its bottom corner had tooth marks and a narrow bend where the dog forced its nose against the steel. Rule 4. If a coworker has been bitten or begins acting strange, notify security and back away. The museum trained every employee to recognize the early stages of infection. A bite did not change someone at once. The first signs often appeared within several minutes. The injured person began sweating. Simple questions became difficult. Anger replaced fear. The person watched hands, faces, and exposed skin. Most tried to cover the wound. Martin said the attempt to hide it was one of the most reliable signs. Every employee knew what happened after a serious bite. Security separated the injured person from everybody else and took control. The medical room stayed ready whenever the live wing was occupied. That knowledge, it made people dishonest. A worker could look at a bite on his own arm and decide the teeth had barely touched him. He could cover it with a sleeve, finish the shift, and hope the sickness never started. It had happened before. During training, Martin showed me a security video recorded several years earlier. An employee entered the break room holding his left arm close to his body. Another worker asked what happened. The injured man said he'd cut himself on a display case. For the next few minutes, he sat at a table and pressed a towel against the wound. Sweat spread across the back of his uniform. When the other employee reached for the phone, the injured man knocked it away. Security entered less than a minute later. By then, the injured employee no longer answered to his name. Martin stopped the recording before the guards reached the table. "Do not examine the bite," he began. "You do not argue with the person, you notify security, and you move away fast." Ordinary injuries were common in the maintenance department. The building had old display cases, sharp cabinet edges, and heavy equipment. Employees showed each other every cut so nobody had to wonder where it came from. Joel followed that habit. One night, he scraped his palm while moving a box of cleaning supplies. He came straight to me with his open hand. "Cabinet edge," Joel said. "Straight line, no teeth, don't worry." I looked at the shallow cut and nodded. "Tell Martin," I said. Yeah, I'm doing it now," Joel replied. He reported the injury, washed it, and covered it with a bandage. The process took less than 5 minutes. Joel complained about security after that. He thought the guards treated every scratch like an outbreak. He'd worked on the live wing long enough to know the difference between a bite and a cut, he said. Martin heard him once and pointed toward the medical room door. "Everyone who's been bitten knew the difference until it happened to them," he said. Joel stopped complaining near Martin after that, but he still rolled his eyes whenever we checked each other's hands. The zombies reacted to fresh blood. If someone cut a finger in the containment hallway, every head turned toward that smell. Chains moved against the floor, and the dogs woke in the far kennels. Because of that, even a normal cut required a report. Security closed nearby feeding doors while the employee left the wing. Maintenance cleaned the blood with long-handled tools. One night, I caught my thumb on a broken trash can lid near number 7. The cut was small, but a drop of blood landed on the concrete outside the red line. Number 7 lifted his head. The zombies in the next 3 enclosures turned with him. One began pulling its collar against the wall. Another reached between the bars and dragged its nails across the floor. I pressed the call button and stepped into the public hall. Joel brought a bandage, and security cleaned the drop from behind a portable shield. The reaction ended once the smell disappeared. That small cut, it changed the way I watched my coworkers. Sweat could come from hard work. Anger could come from a bad night. Confusion could come from exhaustion. A covered arm combined with those signs, it meant I called security. I decided that before I ever needed to make the choice. If the bite belonged to somebody I liked, the instructions still applied. If the person begged me to stay quiet, I would report it. Security could decide what happened next. My job was to keep the injured person from reaching anyone else. Rule 5. If the containment lights turn red, enter the nearest safe room and wait for security. White lights covered the live containment wing during a normal shift. A red light sat beside every fixture. If a restraint broke, a kennel opened, or a motion sensor detected movement outside an enclosure, the white lights shut off and the red lights came on. An alarm sounded once, then the wing became quiet enough for security to hear movement. Employees were not allowed to investigate. Safe rooms stood at both ends of the human wing, beside the kennels and near the medical area. Each one had a steel door, a reinforced window, water, a first aid kit, and a radio. A button inside locked the surrounding hallway doors and divided the containment wing into smaller sections. Martin showed me how to close each safe room during my first shift. He made me practice until I could pull the door shut and press the lock button in a few seconds. "Security knows the building," he said. The alarm activated for the first time during my 5th week. I was emptying trash near the examination pens. Joel had gone to the public hall, and Martin was checking the dog kennels. A sharp tone sounded above me. The white lights went dark. Red light filled the hallway. A chain dragged across the floor beyond the corner. The nearest safe room was 10 steps away. I carried the trash bag with me, entered, and pulled the door closed. The lock button turned green after I pressed it. From the window, I could see part of collection number 4's enclosure. Number 4 had been a woman found in a farmhouse north of Youngstown. Her ankle chain had separated near the floor ring. The collar and secondary cable still held her to the wall, but she could move several feet beyond the painted boundary. She reached into the hallway and pulled the cleaning cart toward the bars. One wheel crossed the red line. Her fingers caught the lower shelf. Bottles and brushes fell across the concrete as she dragged the cart sideways. The secondary cable stopped her before she reached the safe room door. Security entered through the far end of the wing, behind portable shields. The guard secured a new line to her collar, pulled her back, and locked a bar across the enclosure. Martin entered after them and inspected the floor ring. The white lights came on 14 minutes after the alarm. I waited for the radio message before opening the safe room. The broken chain lay on the floor. One link had split along a thin crack that was almost impossible to see from the outside. Martin held it beneath a bright inspection lamp. This passed the morning check," he began. "That's why the light matters more than what you think you saw." Number 4 had remained attached to the wall. From my position near the examination pens, I might have believed she could not reach the hall. The cleaning cart proved otherwise. The maintenance team replaced every ankle chain in the wing over the next 2 days. During that work, the zombies were held by temporary cables and watched by extra guards. Joel complained that the alarm had stopped an entire shift over one broken link. 14 minutes, Martin began. "A controlled emergency should be short." After that night, the red lights activated twice for minor problems. One alarm came from a loose kennel sensor. The other came when a guard's shield touched the wrong side of a motion line. Both times, I entered the nearest safe room and waited. The rule removed every decision from the moment. I didn't need to identify the problem or decide whether the alarm was serious. Red light meant steel door, lock button, and radio. Following it became easy. And that mattered on the night Joel crossed the line. By the beginning of my 3rd month, the museum had become a regular job. I arrived before the public section closed, changed into my uniform, and checked the maintenance closet. After the last visitors left, Joel and I cleaned the galleries. Then we entered the live wing and finished the work that required security nearby. Joel moved faster than I did. He could clean both sides of the human wing while I finished the examination area. Martin had warned him about touching the red paint, but Joel believed experience made him safe. The shift began like every other Thursday. The dogs had already eaten and were sleeping. Security had inspected the restraints. The human zombies stood inside their enclosures while Joel and I cleaned the floor. Number 7 was in his usual position, with his head lowered. Joel carried a ring holding keys for the supply rooms, the public display cases, and the cleaning cabinets. He kept it attached to his belt by a short clip. While he bent to replace a trash liner, the clip opened. The keys struck the concrete and slid beneath the lower rail of number 7's enclosure. They stopped several inches beyond the red line. "Leave him, call Martin," I said. Joel looked at number 7. The zombie's hands hung near his knees. His ankle chain lay loose across the floor, and his collar cable ran straight back to the wall. "They're right there," Joel said. "Leave them," I replied. Joel set down the trash bag. He placed the toe of one shoe against the red paint and leaned forward. I moved beside him quickly. "Joel, stop." He stepped over the line. Joel crouched and reached beneath a rail. His fingers closed around the key ring, and then number 7 lunged. The wrist chains pulled tight as he caught Joel's sleeve. Joel fell onto one knee and struck the lower rail. Number 7 pulled his arm between the bars. I grabbed the back of Joel's belt and dragged him away. The sleeve tore at the shoulder. Joel rolled across the red line and landed beside the cleaning cart. Number 7 kept a strip of uniform cloth in one hand. Joel stood and backed against the wall. Blood ran from his forearm to his wrist. The bite had gone through the sleeve below his elbow. Joel covered it with his other hand and looked toward the security room. "Don't call him." I reached for the emergency button anyway. It barely caught me. Just give me a minute." I pressed the button. Joel moved toward me. "I said I'm fine. Don't let him take me." I stepped backward and kept the cleaning cart between us. Number 7 pulled against his chains behind Joel. The infected people in the next enclosures had already turned toward the blood. Joel wrapped the torn sleeve around his arm. His face became wet with sweat. He looked down the hall, then toward the public door. We need to leave. Drive me to a hospital." I moved farther away. Joel pushed the cleaning cart aside. His hands shook, and he had trouble fastening the cloth around the wound. When the key ring fell from his grip, he stared at it without bending to pick it up. Chains struck the concrete on both sides of the hallway. Number 7 reached through the bars again. Another zombie pulled its collar against the wall until the metal plate moved. The alarm sounded. The white lights shut off, and red light flooded the wing. The nearest safe room stood beside the examination area. I moved toward it, and Joel followed. "Open it for me." I entered the room and pulled the door close enough to leave a narrow gap. Joel was still several steps away. Blood had reached his fingertips. "Stay there," I said. But Joel came closer. I closed the door and pressed the lock button. He struck the reinforced window with his palm. "Let me in, man." I picked up the radio and reported his name, the bite, and our location. Security answered from the far end of the wing. Joel pulled the safe room handle, but the door stayed locked. He looked toward the public hall, but steel barriers had already closed across both exits. The red light showed his reflection in the window. Sweat covered his face. He pressed the bitten arm against his chest and walked away from the door. 2 guards entered the wing behind shields. Martin followed them. Joel shouted that he didn't need their help. He tried to move around the first shield, but the guards blocked the hallway. Martin called him by name and told him to stay where he was. Joel turned toward my safe room. "Tell him I'm fine." I kept the door locked. The guards took Joel to the floor and secured his arms. He fought them until they lifted him behind the shields. Martin opened the medical room door, and they carried Joel inside. The door closed. Security ordered me to remain in the safe room. I could see number 7 pulling at the strip of Joel's sleeve. The other zombies continued reaching toward the blood on the floor. A cleaning team entered from the kennel side and covered the floor with a white chemical powder. They collected the key ring with a steel hook and removed the cleaning cart. When the blood was gone, the zombies slowly returned to the backs of their enclosures. Number 7 kept the torn cloth. The red light stayed on for the rest of the hour. Nobody told me what was happening inside the medical room. The radio carried short messages between security and the front office, but none of them included Joel's condition. Martin finally entered the safe room after midnight. "I'll call you before your next shift." Is Joel alive?" I interrupted. "Go home," Martin said. I changed out of my uniform and left through the public entrance. Number 7 still held part of Joel's sleeve when I passed the steel door. Martin did not call the next day. On Saturday morning, he left a short message telling me to return for my normal shift on Monday. I called the museum twice and received no information about Joel. When I returned, a new floor ring had been installed inside number 7's enclosure. The red line had been moved back another foot. Joel's name had been removed from the maintenance schedule. Joel returned to the museum near the end of summer. I saw him standing behind the counter in the public gift shop. He wore a long-sleeved shirt with one empty sleeve pinned near his shoulder. The doctors had cut off his arm before the infection spread through the rest of his body. Joel was thinner, and he moved carefully while arranging books on the counter. The museum had given him a job in the public section. He could work around visitors, sell tickets, and help with the Farmer Rambo exhibit. He would never enter the live containment wing again. I stopped near the counter. Joel looked at me, then at the steel door at the end of the hall. I was angry with you. For a while, I blamed you for all of it." I waited. "And then they told me how close it was. If you had let me leave, I would have died." He held out his remaining hand. "Thank you," he said. I shook it. Joel worked in the gift shop for another year. He became the person who explained the Lake Tomahawk display to school groups. When children laughed at the sign about putting cows inside, he opened the copy of Rambo's journal and showed them the same warning written across the pages. I continued working nights. The museum replaced number 7's wrist chains and installed another rail around his enclosure. I stayed well behind the new red line. The zombie dogs received enough food to make all 3 close their eyes. Every injury was reported, and every red alarm sent me into the nearest safe room. 4 of the 5 instructions on my card protected someone during my first 3 months. The first one never applied to my job. The museum still has no cows, and I have never owned any. But if you live near Youngstown or Lake Tomahawk and keep cattle, bring them into the barn before the sun goes down. Because Farmer Rambo, he left that warning for a reason.
My name is Jason, and I used to think I was going to save the planet. You know the type, public school, eco club president, wore a recycled bottle hoodie for 2 years, yelled at people who didn't separate their trash. That was me. I used to collect rainwater in a secondhand fish tank just to water my tiny balcony garden. I thought every little thing counted. I still do, kind of. I went to school for environmental science. 4 years of soil reports, carbon math, and professors who wore trail shoes to class. I was going to work for a nonprofit, live out of a van if I had to, protest pipelines, get arrested for the right reasons. Instead, I spent most of last year organizing spreadsheets for a recycling firm that didn't even recycle half the time. They just sorted waste for someone else to throw away more efficiently. I quit after 8 months, told myself it was temporary. Graduation was a blur. All my friends were talking about internships, fellowships, next steps. I was smiling for pictures and pretending I had a plan. I didn't expect anybody from my family to show up. Most of them were too far away or too old to travel. But just after they called my name and I walked across the stage, I saw her in the crowd. My grandmother, Miss Hazel. Purple church hat, sunglasses, big smile like she'd been there the whole time. After the ceremony, we sat under a tree while people packed up around us. She handed me an envelope with $200 and told me I'd done well enough for now. Then she said, "Come learn the family business." I thought she meant real estate or insurance. Maybe one of those city jobs my cousins like to name drop when they wanted to sound like they were doing something respectable. I never really asked what Grandma did for work. Not properly. I had a vague memory of a corner shop from when I was little, the kind of place with sticky floors and too many smells competing for attention. Bread, bleach, beans, old sugar. I remembered getting scolded once for knocking over a jar of something that definitely wasn't meant for kids. There was always a line, too. People waited for canned goods, produce, bags of rice. Some of them looked tired. Some didn't quite look like people. That was Grandma's shop in Harlem. She called it Marva's Market and Goods, like it was just another mom-and-pop bodega on the block. But it wasn't. Turns out, she sells groceries to monsters. That part took me a while to understand. No one bothered to hide it from me, but no one bothered to explain it either. Grandma's never been big on explanations. She always figured if you were old enough to ask, you were old enough to see for yourself. The shop runs like any other place during the day. Collard greens in crates out front, coffee by the gallon behind the counter, a stack of lottery tickets next to the register. But once the sun goes down, something changes. A door opens in the back. An actual hidden door behind an old bookshelf. And the shop becomes something else entirely. That's the real business. Roots in jars, bones in paper, candles with handwritten labels, herbs you don't find at bodegas unless you know how to ask. There's a back room that smells like smoke and salt and cinnamon, and every shelf feels like it's been there 100 years. Some of them probably have. Grandma's a witch. A real witch. Not the costume kind, or the weird Etsy people who sell self-branded tea. She's the kind that learned everything from her mother, who learned it from hers, and so on and so forth. Old Southern root work, passed down through hands and lots of stories by the stove. Grandma is who people go to when they need a problem solved the supernatural way. I grew up around it. Holidays spent sweeping the floor, wrapping bundles, writing labels, but I was never taught what anything meant. Grandma kept me just far enough outside the circle to stay safe. But now that I'm grown, she says it's time to learn. She says the shop's gonna be mine someday, and I need to know what I'm inheriting. So here I am, 6 months in, learning the ropes, watching my grandmother light candles and mix oils like it's no big deal, helping werewolves pick shampoo, ringing up ghost customers who leave payment in old coins that melt if you stare too long. It's a lot, but I'm starting to get the hang of it. Still, I'm getting ahead of myself. We could talk about all that later. There's more you should know about Grandma and the shop. More importantly, the shop's familiar, Salem. He's a gray cat with a bad attitude and a long memory. Nobody told me his full story, but people like to talk. And over time, I've heard enough to piece some of it together. The rumor is that he used to be a wizard. He was the arrogant, powerful type who thought rules didn't apply to him. At some point, he pissed off an all-powerful enchantress, and she turned him into a cat for the next 1,000 years. No one knows how long ago that was. When I asked Grandma once, she just said, "He's not halfway through yet." Salem doesn't like talking, but he'll get his point across some other way. He'll knock over jars if you forget to feed him. He'll disappear for hours when you need him most and show up later looking smug about it. He likes to sit on the highest shelf in the back room where the herbs are stored just out of reach. Grandma named him Salem as a joke, which he clearly didn't find funny. I only found out later she was talking about the black cat from that old witch sitcom from the 90s. The shop itself is called Hazel's Marketing Goods. It sits on the corner of 137th and Malcolm X, right between a barber shop and a storefront church. Looks like any other Harlem bodega. Dusty produce crates out front, neon open sign in the windows, bell that rings when the door swings too wide. You can buy soap, cereal, canned vegetables, frozen waffles, paper towels, batteries, toothpaste, the usual stuff. But that's just during the day. After 8 p.m., we close the front and open the back. Not to the alley, but to a different part of the building. There's a bookshelf in the office. Grandma keeps her favorite book on it. An old, battered hard copy of Frankenstein on the spine. If you pull it out and turn it just right, the back panel opens and leads to a narrow hallway. At the end of that hallway is the night shop. That's where things change. The walls are lined with wooden shelves. The floor is stone. The ceiling hangs low and warm, and the air smells like cinnamon, smoke, and copper. Every jar is labeled, even the ones containing eyeballs. Every candle is handmade. There are roots wrapped in cloth, powders in sealed tins, bones tied with string, and bundles of herbs that don't grow anywhere I've ever studied. There are oils that shimmer like motor fluid, and little red flannel bags sewn shut with black thread. Grandma's shop serves Harlem's supernatural crowd, the ones that live tucked between the cracks. Old southern bloodlines that go back generations. Werewolves with tired eyes and careful manners. Witches from Louisiana with mud still under their nails. River spirits who drag muck all over the floor but still have the audacity to barter. Every so often, a boo hag comes through, looking for coffee beans and gluten-free bread. Sirens from the Hudson Valley pass through on their way south, always asking for salt and tobacco. You get the idea. Most of what I do involves stocking shelves and labeling jars. I wipe down the counter every night and restock the candles when we run low. When Grandma's knees don't hurt, she lets me help her brew things I can hardly stand the smell of. And through it all, Salem watches. I've been working here close to 6 months now, and trust me, I have stories that'll keep curious people like you up all night. So go on, pull up a chair. Pour yourself some of Grandma's famous carrot tea, if you can handle the kick. We have time. Let me tell you how it all started. My very first day in the shop. I remember it like it was yesterday. Grandma picked me up from the train station herself. I offered to grab a cab, but she said no one with sense paid money to get lost that deep in Harlem. And besides, she had errands to run. She pulled up in an old blue Buick that rumbled like it'd been hexed into staying alive. When I opened the door, there was a full sack of yams in the front seat. She told me to hold it on my lap and not ask questions. That was my first job, I guess. Yam security. We rode in silence for a while. Then she asked if I was hungry. I said I'd eaten on the train, which was true, but it didn't stop her from handing me a brown paper bag with 2 hot rolls and a square of cornbread wrapped in foil. I didn't say no. You don't turn down Grandma's food. Not if you know what's good for you. When we got to the corner of 137th and Malcolm X, she pulled into a spot like it belonged to her. Probably did. The shop looked just like I remembered from when I was a kid. Narrow red awning, windows taped with paper signs, old handwritten hours. 2 milk crates were holding up a display of overripe tomatoes. "Well, this is it. Hazel's Market. Been mine since before you had teeth," she said. Inside, it smelled like floor wax and black paper. The place was tight, with rows of narrow shelves packed full of groceries. Most of it was regular stuff: bread, rice, cereal, cleaning supplies, canned goods. A few shelves leaned to one side, but none had fallen yet. A little bell jingled when we came in, and the air felt warmer somehow. She gave me a tour like it was any old job. First, the basics. Register in the front, broom in the back, break table next to the ice machine, even though she didn't like people sitting down on the clock. I was to keep the shelves neat, sweep before closing, and never move the jar by the window. When I asked why, she just said, "It's got a job to do, same as you." Then she walked me to the back row and pointed to the last shelf on the left. Looked normal, stacked with paper towels and bags of rice. "This one's not like the others. She's called Helen. If you treat her right, she'll restock herself," Grandma said, tapping the side of the shelf with the back of her hand. I stared at her. "You named your shelf." "She named herself. Now go on, be polite." I looked at the shelf, then back at Grandma. She didn't blink. So I sighed, leaned in a little, and said, "You're looking real solid today, Helen. Straight lines, good wood grain. I'm real proud of you." A box of rice slid into place on the bottom row, like it'd been there the whole time. I rubbed my eyes, like I was seeing things but didn't say anything else. Grandma just gave me that little smug smile of hers that her and Dad have in common before turning down the next aisle. Next, she brought me into the office. The desk was stacked with loose papers, a cash box, and 3 ceramic frogs that stared straight ahead like they were listening. On the far wall stood an old bookshelf, packed with cookbooks, gardening guides, and what looked like one very out-of-place sci-fi novel. It took me a second to realize that it was a battered edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. She walked straight up to it and pulled it off the top shelf. The whole bookshelf slid open like a door. "Come on. Let me show you the rest," she said. I followed her into a hallway, just wide enough for one person at a time. It opened up into a room that didn't make sense, size-wise. From the outside, this should have been a closet, but the inside went deep. Long shelves, stone walls, soft light from glass lanterns hanging overhead. It looked more like a root cellar than part of a Harlem bodega. "This is where the work happens. During the day, we feed people. At night, we help them with something a little more special," she said. I stood there for a second, just trying to take it all in. There were labeled jars, cloth-wrapped bundles, candles, and tiny bags pinned up like museum pieces. The whole place smelled like cinnamon and dried herbs. Not the kind you find in plastic shakers, either. Real ones, picked by hand. "I don't expect you to understand all this right away. Your daddy never took to it. Black thumb, that one. Good man, but magic slid off him like rain off a slick coat. But you might have something. That blood didn't skip every generation," she said, as she looked me over. I told her I wasn't looking to become a root worker. I was just here to help her out, run errands whenever she needed. She smiled, like that was enough for now. Good, good. Well, we'll see where it goes, she said. And that's when I met Salem. He walked in from the hallway, like he owned the place. Sleek gray fur, high tail, eyes half closed like he was already tired of me. I bent down to greet him, and got one sharp swipe across the toe of my sneaker. No claws, just a warning. Grandma looked over. Oh, that means he likes you. He doesn't bother with people he don't plan on seeing again. I didn't really believe her. I kept my distance just the same. The rest of the night moved quick. A werewolf came in first, still half buttoned into a work shirt, asking if we had any more of the cedar and clove shampoo. Said his usual spot ran out, and the store brand stuff made his coat dull. Grandma handed him a dark bottle from a shelf I hadn't noticed before. No label on it, just a wax seal and a faint pine scent. He paid in exact change and promised to send his cousin by next week. Not long after, a vampire walked in wearing sunglasses and a wool coat like it was still winter. He asked if his order was ready. 2 jars of blood replacement, one warm, one cold. Grandma brought them out from under the counter and placed them gently in a padded box. He nodded his thanks, slipped her a folded bill, and left without a word. Later, a fellow witch stopped by. She and Grandma hugged like old neighbors and caught up in short, quiet phrases. She handed over a neat bundle of cinnamon sticks tied with blue thread. In return, Grandma gave her a small, cloudy jar filled with what looked like pickled eyeballs. Some open, some not. Neither of them blinked. They just traded, nodded, and the woman walked out humming to herself. I stood off to the side, trying not to stare. Grandma didn't explain a single thing. She just moved through it all like this was the most natural job in the world. I didn't understand half of what I saw, but I knew enough to stay out of the way and keep the counter clean. By the time we closed up, I realized I hadn't looked at my phone once. Wasn't what I expected. Wasn't anything like what I'd pictured. But I went to bed that night thinking maybe I'd stumbled onto something better. Maybe it was something I could get good at. Even if the cat hated me. I was sure Salem would warm up to me eventually. Maybe. Getting used to the routine of running the shop came easy, but I couldn't shake something off my mind. Like, why'd she take so long to come get me and explain it all? Grandma didn't bring it up right away. Weeks passed before she sat me down in the conjure room. It was late. The store was closed, the front lights off, and the back room smelled like cinnamon, bay leaf, and something warm I couldn't name. She had a kettle on, and the air carried steam from carrot tea and the soft sound of jars clinking when she moved things around. That night, she pulled up a stool, handed me a mug, and said it was time I learned about root work. Real root work. This isn't wizard magic, she began. This ain't no fireball in one hand and lightning in the other. No arson. Got it, I said. She smacked me for that. She went on. She said root work, hoodoo, conjure, call it what you like, was magic for the people. It was born out of necessity and survival through the darkest times. It's everyday magic, household magic. Dust and bones to create tonics to heal the sick. Salt laid in the corners to keep out the ghouls. Red brick ground up under the window frame. Things to keep you safe. To keep your people safe. That's what this is. She moved around the room as she talked. Her hands passed over jars filled with powders and oils, and eyeballs that moved. She pointed out the difference between hot devil's powder and bone dust, showed me where she kept the graveyard dirt. let me smell 2 different jars of pixie dust and asked which one felt stronger. I didn't know how to answer, but she said my guess was right anyway. This kind of work helped folks through the worst of times, the kind of poor where there's no soup left in the pot, the kind of sickness where there's no doctor coming. We made do with what we had, and we kept each other whole, she said, as she passed me a jar labeled frog toes. She said her own mother taught her, back when they lived in the Low Country, before they moved north. Said every woman in the line carried some piece of the knowledge, even if they didn't want it, even if it scared them. Grandma wasn't afraid. She learned everything she could. I tried to teach your daddy once. He didn't take to it. Not that he wasn't smart, he just didn't have the right hands for it, she said. I leaned forward, turning the mug in my hands. Why didn't she ever teach me any of this growing up? Not even a little? Because it wasn't my call. Your daddy asked me not to. Said he wanted to raise you clean. Said you'd already been through enough losing your mama, and he didn't want you getting caught up. And I honored it, even though it hurt me. I kept you out of the shop. I thought maybe one day he'd change his mind. My brow furrowed. Dad asked you not to. Your daddy loved your mama something fierce. When she passed, something in him folded up, like he couldn't unbend no matter how long I waited. He meant well, Sonny, but he was grieving for a long time. And grief, well, it makes people turn away from what used to give them comfort, she explained. I looked at the table between us. There was a bowl of roots soaking in water. Their edges had gone soft. The water smelled like soil and iron. But you're here now, and we've got time to catch up. You may not have come up with it, but that don't mean it can't live in you, she said with a smile. I smiled back. She stood again, moved toward a small box on the shelf, and brought out a folded cloth with something wrapped inside. When she opened it, I saw a small bundle tied with string, filled with what looked like dirt, bone, and dried herbs. This is a starter hand for protection. Don't ask it for anything fancy now, just carry it. Keep it close. You'll know when you need it. I took it without asking questions. The cloth felt warm, like it'd been sitting in the sun, even though the room was cool. You don't have to be a root worker, she began, but you need to understand where you come from. This isn't just magic. This is blood and legacy. Your dad knew it. I know it. You ought to know it too. The room was quiet for a while after that, and the smell of steeped roots and the sound of the kettle boiling filled the room. For the first time, I understood why my dad kept me away. Grandma had given me space to come back on my own terms, and somehow, without even meaning to, I had. I didn't know what all this would mean yet, what I was supposed to do with root magic or legacy or any of it. But I didn't feel lost. At least not there in that room with Grandma. It felt like the ground had finally settled under me. And for someone like me, it was a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Grandma's lesson stayed with me for the next few days. I kept the little protection bundle she gave me in the inner pocket of my jacket and found myself checking it without thinking. It didn't glow or pulse or do anything special. It just sat there with a sort of weight. It was comforting. The place fell back into its usual rhythm after that. Regulars came and went. The front stayed calm, the back stayed busy, and Grandma drifted in and out like someone who operated on a schedule only she understood. She said she had to commune with the spirits, and the way she said it made it clear she didn't expect me to ask follow-up questions. She packed a thermos, a bag of dried herbs, and one of her heavier shawls, and then she slipped out the back door. Sometimes she was gone for hours, sometimes days. This time it was the latter. The third morning, she still hadn't returned, and I was halfway through sorting a crate of plantains when someone stepped into the shop who looked, for lack of a better word, like shit. The man introduced himself as Luther. He was tall and broad, his clothes were worn, and his jeans scuffed and frayed at the edges. He stood near the counter with both hands tucked into his jacket pockets, like he was trying not to touch anything, till he was sure he was allowed. His eyes kept drifting toward the back hallway, as if he expected Grandma to appear any minute. When I told him she wasn't here, and that I couldn't be sure when she'd be back, something in him tightened. He shifted his weight and looked around the store again, as though trying to decide whether he should stay or leave. He stayed. He explained why he'd come. He said he worked at a construction site on the far side of Harlem and had taken a cheap apartment nearby to save money on subway fare. He didn't try to sell it as anything more than it was. A bad building in a rough area with a rent price low enough to raise suspicion. He said he'd taken it anyway because the commute had been wearing him down, and he wanted a place close enough to walk. The trouble started after he moved in. Small things at first. Things a tired man might overlook, but they grew. The first issue was the smell. He said the apartment smelled like blood on Wednesdays only, no other day. No matter how much he scrubbed, no matter how often he aired the place out, it sat under the walls and floors like something no one had properly cleaned up. And then all the light bulbs broke. Not at once, one at a time, until the entire apartment went dark. He replaced them, but they kept breaking, and now he lived by candlelight. The last problem was the one he couldn't ignore. He said he'd been waking up with dirt on his chest every morning, and not just a little. Enough to coat his sheets, enough to leave a trail on the floor when he stood up. His nails were cracked and packed with soil he didn't remember touching. Some mornings he found dried blood at the edges of his cuticles, as if he'd clawed at something rough for hours. His shoes were scuffed to the leather. His jeans had dirt ground deep into the seams. He tried to explain it away at first. Maybe he'd scratched the floor in his sleep. Maybe the dirt tracked in from the hallway. What finally broke him was the news. A string of graves had been disturbed at a cemetery a few blocks from his building. Not vandalized, opened, dug up with bare hands and no footprints around him. The evening broadcast showed photos of the damaged plots, and he felt sick to his stomach. He woke up the next day with blood under his nails again, and felt exhausted down to the bone, like he'd worked a full shift in his sleep. He didn't know what any of it meant, but he knew it wasn't right. And when he told this story at the bar where he stopped after work, the bartender told him to go talk to the witch. That was how he ended up standing in front of me, waiting for someone to tell him whether he was imagining things, or if something was genuinely wrong with him or his home. I stood behind the counter, tried to decide what I was supposed to do. Grandma wasn't here. She hadn't given me instructions for situations like this. But Luther kept standing there with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders drawn tight, like a man holding his breath. And after a few moments, it felt like the only answer was the simple one. I told him I could come take a look. I went to the back room and packed a small tote bag with the items Grandma always used for simple protection cases. A candle, a bag of salt, a charm made from dried herbs and thread. A small jar of cleansing mix she kept pre-made on the highest shelf. I didn't know whether any of it would help, but I recognized them from watching her work, and they made sense to bring. When I set the bag on the floor to add a few more items, Salem climbed inside without hesitation. He circled once and settled himself in like this was a routine he'd been waiting for. He didn't look at me for permission. He never did. I figured if the shop familiar wanted to come along, might be better to let him. I checked the tote once more, adjusted the strap, and told Luther I was ready. He nodded. He didn't seem reassured, but he didn't seem alone anymore either. Sometimes that's the best someone can ask for. We stepped out onto the sidewalk with the tote over my shoulder, Salem's ears just barely visible from inside the bag, and the evening settling in across Harlem like another layer of the city waking up. I locked the front door, checked it twice, and reminded myself that this was part of the job now. Root workers made house calls. Witches did too. And if I was going to help Grandma run this place one day, I needed to learn how to walk into trouble instead of around it. I didn't know what we would find in Luther's apartment, but I sent a quick prayer to whoever was listening, knowing we'd need all the help we could get. Luther led the way through a few side streets until we reached his building. The entrance had peeling paint and a broken buzzer. The hallways were narrow and dim, and the whole place smelled like boiled cabbage the moment we stepped in. It wasn't subtle. The scent clung to the walls and floors and floated down the hallway in a steady wave. Made my stomach turn, but I tried to keep a straight face as we climbed up to the third floor. I learned enough from Grandma to know that smells mattered. Certain ones showed up in old magic, especially the kind used to hide work someone didn't want found. Boiled cabbage was common in Eastern European folklore. It was used to mask the presence of a spell. I'd read that in one of Grandma's books the week before, and now it clicked in a way that felt too on the nose to ignore. Luther unlocked the door to his apartment, and the smell got worse. Salem jumped out of the tote bag as soon as we stepped inside and began walking the perimeter. The apartment itself was small. One bedroom, one kitchen, and a living room with a sagging couch. The floorboards were worn down in patches. A candle sat on every flat surface. Luther hadn't exaggerated. Every light bulb really was gone. I walked through the rooms and tried not to think about how unqualified I felt. I wasn't Grandma. I didn't have decades of practice. I only had what she'd shown me and what I remembered from watching her work. Still, I was here now, and Luther was watching me with a look that expected something useful. I started with the basics. I checked the corners of the rooms for unusual powders or markings. I checked the door frame for symbols or scratches. I checked under the mattress for anything that didn't belong. The candlelight made it easy to see the small things. A few piles of dirt on the sheets confirmed what Luther had said. His shoes by the doors were still covered in mud. His jacket sleeves were frayed, like he'd been digging through rough ground. Salem circled the living room twice before pausing near the kitchen. His ears flicked once. His tail twitched. Then he walked toward the refrigerator and sat down in front of it, like he'd found what we were looking for. I took that as my cue. I moved into the kitchen and pulled the refrigerator forward. It scraped across the floor with a long grinding sound. Behind it, the wall didn't sit flush. There was a narrow panel with a small gap at the bottom, just wide enough for a hand to slip through. The boiled cabbage smell was coming from there, stronger than anywhere else. When I pulled the panel free, a small crawl space revealed itself. Big enough for a few objects, not big enough for a person. Salem backed up, his fur raised slightly. Inside the crawl space was a bundle wrapped in cloth. The fabric was stained and tied with something that looked like old twine. I didn't touch it right away. Instead, I studied it the way Grandma always did when someone brought her something strange. The cloth looked handmade. The twine wasn't twine at all, but horsehair, braided tightly. The smell of boiled cabbage came from inside that bundle. It was a concealment trick. Someone had placed this here intentionally. It wasn't an accident, and it didn't belong to Luther. I took the bundle out and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I untied it carefully. Inside were bone fragments, herbs I didn't recognize, a stone covered in red dust, and a piece of cloth that looked like it'd been torn from someone's clothing, all wrapped together in a way that spoke of a deliberate hand. It was a voodoo artifact. Old, tense, the kind used to direct fear or sickness towards someone without even touching them. Grandma kept items like this locked away at the back of the conjure room. She said they were nothing to play with. I unpacked the tote bag and set out the items I'd brought. The candle for clearing, the salt for boundaries, the protection charm for the room, the jar of cleansing mix for the corners. I worked slowly, the same way I'd seen Grandma do it. Salt across the threshold first, then the corners, then the windowsills, then the candle in the center of the living room. I lit it and watched the flame catch. I repeated the process through every room, making sure the salt line stayed unbroken. Salem inspected every spot after I finished it, which I took as approval. When the work was done, the apartment felt different. Not lighter exactly, but calmer. The boiled cabbage smell didn't vanish, but it faded enough to make the place feel like a real home instead of something under a spell. Luther thanked me. There was something in the change of his expression that caught my eye. It looked like he believed he'd finally be able to sleep. Grandma returned to the shop 3 days later. She listened to everything I told her about the apartment and the crawl space. She examined the bundle I'd wrapped up and brought back. She didn't touch it with her bare hands. She said Luther must have upset someone connected to old magic. Maybe an ex-wife with the wrong kind of ties. Maybe a boss with family roots he didn't talk about. Someone with access to his place and a grudge deep enough to do this kind of thing. They planted the artifact, and the apartment did the rest. She called it a boneyard curse, an old spell meant to drive a person toward the grave one night at a time. Left alone long enough, it would have pulled Luther toward the place he kept waking up covered in dirt from. A person doesn't survive that kind of end. They go willingly, because the curse tells them to. If I hadn't made the house call, Grandma said he would have buried himself alive within weeks. But Luther was safe now. The curse was broken. The apartment was clean. Whoever had planted the artifact hadn't shown themselves, and that part of the mystery would remain unsolved to this day. Things settled down after the Luther case, at least by Harlem standards. The shop kept its usual rhythm, and Grandma slipped back into her routines like she'd never been gone. I kept helping customers, stocking shelves, learning names, and figuring out which jars I wasn't supposed to touch unless she told me to. The familiar regulars still stopped by, Betty with her bags of gossip and clumsy elbows, Jack with his cigarette smoke and soft voice, and the rest of the neighborhood's supernatural crowd who treated the shop like a second home. I stayed. Wasn't a decision I made all at once. It just happened in the way slow decisions do. The kind you realize only after they've already become true. Some mornings, I would catch sight of my degree hanging on the back wall of my room and feel that itch, Like I should be doing something more official, more, career-shaped. But that itch got smaller every day. Harlem had its own kind of work waiting for me. Real work. Work that people needed. Grandma still called most of the shots, but every now and then she gave me a job that carried more weight. A cleansing, a blessing, a reading. Nothing big, nothing too dangerous, but enough to show she trusted me to take steps in the same direction she'd walked her whole life. I didn't call myself a root worker, and she didn't call me one either. She said the title wasn't important. The responsibility was. I could see myself staying here for a long time. Maybe longer than I expected. There's something about this neighborhood that keeps you in place. Not trapped, exactly, and just anchored. And once you start paying attention, you realize how many stories sit under the sidewalks and fire escapes. Monsters buying groceries. Witches trading recipes. Spirits trying to pay off old debts. It's a strange corner of the world, but it feels honest in a way my old life never did. So that's all I've got for now. Those are the stories I can tell without Grandma fussing at me for sharing too much. If you've listened this far, well, thank you. I'll have more eventually. Harlem always provides. Oh, and if you ever need anything, bread, beans, coffee, or maybe a solution to a problem you can't say out loud to anyone else, you know where to find us. Until then, be careful out there.
Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night. I hadn't meant to stay up late, but when you've got nowhere to be the next morning, the hours start blending together till you're not sure whether you're killing time or it's killing you. It was past midnight. The TV was on but muted. The same news loop replaying silently. Wildfires, stock market, celebrity rehab, repeat. My apartment was quiet. The refrigerator clicked every few minutes, like it was checking whether I was still alive. Spots, my black cat, was curled on the back of the couch behind me, tail flicking once every few seconds. Her fur caught the glow from my phone screen. 2 yellow eyes blinking slow, almost judgmentally. Okay, don't look at me like that, I said. It's called decompressing, okay? She stretched, claws flexing in the fabric. I was deep in the kind of boredom that makes you do stupid things. Doom scrolling, watching old game clips, reading comment sections on videos I didn't even like. When I got tired of that, I started taking online quizzes. What breakfast food are you? What color matches your aura? How emotionally damaged are you? Really? Pretty damaged, I thought. For the record, the internet decided I was a burnt pancake with latent resentment issues. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I told myself I'd go to bed after one more. Just one. And that's when I saw it. An ad so plain it somehow stood out. Help shape tomorrow. No picture, no brand, no stupid dancing gif. Just black letters on white, with a blinking button that said, Begin Survey. I stared at it for a while. My thumb hovered over the screen. Didn't even look like it was trying to sell anything. Well, should we help shape tomorrow, Spots? She blinked once, slow and bored. All right, let's see what fresh hell this is. I tapped it. The screen went blank for a second. Then the first question appeared. Dark or light? That was it. 2 buttons.
No intro, no thanks for participating, just the question. I thought about it longer than I should have. My eyelids were heavy. The apartment was already dark. Dark, I said out loud, pressing the button. And the lights went out. I didn't realize it at first. The lamp beside me flickered, sputtered, and died with a faint pop. The TV screen dimmed to black. The tiny green light on the router vanished. The low, constant hum of the fridge, the background noise I'd stopped noticing years ago, just stopped. For a heartbeat, it was total silence. Not the kind you get when things are peaceful, the other kind. The kind that sounds wrong. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the reflection of my own face in the blank screen. Okay, that's... A faint click from the hallway cut me off. Then nothing. The street outside was black too. Even the building across the way, the one with that insomniac who always leaves his kitchen light on, was just a rectangle of shadow now. My phone looked completely dead. The screen was dark, but I could feel warmth against my palm. Spots made a small sound behind me. A low, confused sound. I could barely see her outline now, just the faint gleam of her eyes in the dark. Yeah, I murmured. Guess we got our answer, huh? I sat there listening. Somewhere outside, something metal creaked. Maybe a power line swaying, maybe not. A car alarm tried to start, and then choked out mid-blare. A minute passed. 2. My breathing started to sound too loud. Then, suddenly, my phone blinked to life in my hand. The screen didn't brighten gradually like it should have. It snapped on at full brightness, searing my eyes. The same survey was waiting for me, white on black. Thank you for your selection, it said. Next question. Heat or cold? That was all. No apology for the outage. No glitch message. Just that same plain text like nothing had happened. Spot's head lifted over the arm of the couch. Her eyes tilted toward the phone, like she could hear something I couldn't. All right, I began. Let's play along. My thumb hovered, and then I pressed cold. The air conditioner rattled once, then again. And then, even though the rest of the apartment was still dark, it roared to life, blasting icy air through the vents. I could see my breath. Spots jumped down, landing softly beside me. Fur fluffed out like static. Her tail twitched. Yeah, I whispered, eyes still on the screen. Me too. For a while, I just listened. The air conditioner groaned through the vent like it was dragging winter up from the crawl space. The cold came in waves, until the air in the room felt heavy and thin at the same time. Spots crept closer, silent except for the soft brush of fur against my calf. I could feel her eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. She did that sometimes, watching like she understood something I didn't. The light from the phone painted her fur silver blue. Every breath she took caught that light for a second and disappeared again. We were two outlines floating in a small rectangle of glow. I sat there long enough for the cold to start numbing my fingertips. My brain tried to sort it out, the way you do when something makes no sense but you're too tired to panic yet. Power grid glitch, maybe? Random coincidence? Just a coincidence. Then the screen blinked once. Next question. Flood or fire? That was all. 2 new buttons. The same plain font. Nothing fancy.
Nothing playful. My first instinct was to laugh again, but the sound died halfway up my throat. Flood or fire? Who the hell thought that was a good question for a survey? Spot's ears twitched. She was still sitting by my leg, but her tail had gone stiff, pointing toward the window. Somewhere outside, something rattled. Maybe the wind. Flood, I said quietly, like it mattered whether I answered out loud or not. My thumb hovered over the option for a long second. When I finally pressed it, the phone made no sound, just a small pulse of light. The word processing flashed once, then disappeared. I waited. Nothing. See, I said, turning toward Spot. It's nothing. She didn't move. Her eyes were still fixed on the window. I could see my own reflection in them. Pale face, tired eyes, the glow of the phone hovering like a candle. The silence stretched. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and dropped the phone on the coffee table. It landed face down with a soft tap. For the first time all night, I thought maybe I could just walk away from it, go to bed, pretend I hadn't seen any of it. I leaned back into the couch, rubbed the bridge of my nose, felt the sting of cold on my fingertips. And that's when the phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up right away. The vibration sounded strange in the quiet, a small, nervous heartbeat against the wood of the table. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. Another buzz, longer this time. Then a third. I reached for it, flipped it over. Emily. The name hit me before the rest of it did. I hadn't talked to her in months, not since she moved out west. She used to work nights too. We'd text when one of us couldn't sleep. The message preview glowed. Hey, are you seeing this? I frowned, unlocked the phone. 3 new messages stacked on top of each other, all from her, timestamps only seconds apart. They're saying a tsunami's coming. The whole west coast. People are evacuating LA already. It's real. I can hear the sirens from my window. I'm so scared. I stared at the words until they blurred. A small laugh tried to crawl out of me. No way, I said. You gotta be kidding me. Spots jumped at my voice. I could feel her body brush my knee as she slipped beneath the coffee table. Her tail vanished into the shadows. I opened my news app with numb fingers. The feed was a flood of red banners and shaky phone footage. People running, waves already breaking against piers, helicopters buzzing over a dark ocean. Tsunami warning in effect. Emergency broadcast. 8-point-something offshore. The videos were live, not recorded, not a prank, not rumors. I blinked hard. Flood. My thumb brushed the home button. The survey was still open in the background. Same blank screen, same word in the corner. Processing. I could feel something closing around the back of my throat. The phone buzzed again. Emily. Are you okay? I know you're not here, but I'm just texting everyone. I tried to type something back, but my fingers didn't seem to work right. Yeah, I stopped. What was I supposed to say? Hey, funny story, I might have picked that one. Spots meowed softly under the table. The kind of sound cats make when they want to remind you they exist. I leaned forward, trying to see her, but she was a shadow in the shadow. The phone buzzed again. They're saying it's 30 feet high. It's moving fast. Then nothing. The typing bubble appeared for a second and disappeared again. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then brightened again with a breaking news alert. Tsunami warning issued for West Coast. Catastrophic event possible. I could hear my pulse in my ears. My apartment was still cold, the vent still hissing. I pressed the side button on my phone, closed every app, every tab, until only the home screen was left. I wanted to believe that would fix it. The survey icon blinked once in the background and closed itself, as if it had been watching me. I turned the phone face down again. Spots crept out from under the table, pawed at my ankle, and jumped up beside me. Her fur was cool, smooth, still smelling faintly of dust. She curled against my leg like she always did when storms passed through, though this time, the world outside was perfectly still. I stroked her back and stared at the window, trying to picture the Pacific miles away, swallowing up coastlines, while here, everything still looked the same. My phone buzzed once more, just once. I stared at the screen, at Emily's messages, at the breaking news banners, and something inside me just folded. Whatever morbid curiosity had been keeping me here evaporated. This wasn't funny anymore. Wasn't even horrifying. It was worse than that. "I'm done," I said. I locked the phone, but it vibrated again. A quick, sharp pulse, like a tap on the shoulder. I threw it onto the couch. It buzzed once more, harder. Spots jumped, claws digging into the cushion. I grabbed it and hurled it into the kitchen. It clattered across the linoleum and slid under the table. The screen blinked once and went dead. My hands were shaking now. "I'm done. I'm done. No more," I said. Spots meowed softly, a low, throaty sound. She jumped once, padded across the living room, and sat by the doorway as if waiting for me. I rubbed my face with my palms, feeling the chill of my own skin. The apartment smelled like cold metal now, like the inside of an old freezer. "Coffee," I muttered. Yeah, coffee, that's normal." I went into the kitchen, careful not to look at where the phone had landed. My old coffee maker sat on the counter, half full from the morning. I dumped it, rinsed the pot out with shaking hands, filled it with fresh water. The hiss of the faucet was ordinary. I scooped grounds into the basket. My hands shook so badly I spilled some on the counter. Black specks on fake marble. I brushed them away, focused on the motions. Coffee, filter, water. Press the button. The machine groaned alive. That familiar burbling sound filled the kitchen, steam curling upward. I clung to it like a rope. Spots jumped up onto the counter next to me, tail curling around her paws. She tilted her head, watching me. Her eyes looked bigger in the dimness, pale yellow coins catching every scrap of light. "Hey, girl." My voice was hoarse. I stroked her back with trembling fingers. "We're okay. It's just the internet. Just some weird joke." Her fur was soft and warm under my hand. It grounded me. She purred faintly, a low vibration that steadied me. I poured a mug as soon as the pot filled halfway. The smell was sharp and bitter, cutting through the room. I sipped too soon, burned my tongue, didn't care. "See," I said. "Coffee. We're fine." And then every screen in the apartment turned on at once. The TV in the living room blinked alive, volume off, but light flooding the walls. My laptop in the bedroom, off for days, snapped open by itself. Even the dusty old tablet I kept on the bookshelf lit up, bright rectangles of white in the dark. Spots hissed, fur standing straight up. I set the mug down hard enough for coffee to slosh. No. I stepped into the living room. All the screens were showing the same thing. The survey. That same plain font, now huge, filling every display. Sink or swim. Beneath it, a red digital timer had appeared, ticking down from 10. You have 10 seconds to decide, or the choice will be made for you. My mouth went dry. No. I backed toward the hallway, staring as the numbers ticked. 9, 8. Spots darted under the couch. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun and ran down the hall toward my bedroom. The laptop on my desk was glowing with the same message. The tablet on the nightstand, same message. Even the blank screen of my old TV reflected the countdown in ghostly light. 7, 6. Where's the phone? I muttered. I dropped to my knees, yanking open drawers, scattering old bills, pulling clothes out of the hamper. My hands were slick with sweat. 5, 4. I tore back into the kitchen, heart hammering. The phone had slid under the table, screen still dark. I lunged for it, banged my shoulder against the table leg, cursed. My fingers closed around it. It vibrated once, a low hum like a living thing. 3. The screen lit up in my hand, blindingly bright. Sink or swim. Spots let out a sharp, panicked yowl from somewhere behind me. 2. I didn't think. I just yelled swim and slammed my thumb on the button. The screen went white. The countdown vanished. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. The vent stopped. The fridge started humming again. The TV screens went black one by one. And then I heard it. A sound from the other room. Not a splash, exactly, but a wet, dragging noise. Like something climbing out of a bathtub. Spots? A black blur shot out of the kitchen doorway. Spots barreled toward me, fur plastered to her body, water streaming off her in little rivulets. She was gasping. Cats don't really pant, but she was. Each breath a tiny shudder. I dropped the phone and caught her against my chest. I'm so sorry, are you okay? I held her tighter. Her fur soaked my shirt. She buried her head under my chin, still shaking, tiny heart pounding like a trapped bird's. It's okay, I gotcha, I whispered. I gotcha. I tucked the towel around her and kept a palm on her ribs until the rhythm settled into something close to normal. The apartment smelled like wet gravel and cheap coffee, and the faint copper of my own nerves. The fish tank gurgled sadly from the other room, just the filter taking one last bubbly breath before it died again. You're okay, girl, I said. We're done. I sat her on the couch. She crouched low, eyes huge, a narrow black comma inside the rumpled towel. When I stood, my knees felt like bad hinges. The phone lay face down a few feet away, its light leaking a thin white halo on the tile. I towed it gently, so it skittered under the kitchen table. Out of sight, out of mind. If the world wanted me to pick between bugs and bullets or something, it could send a paper ballot. Coffee, I said. We're doing more coffee. Saying it out loud made me believe in it. I rinsed the carafe, scooped grounds, tried to measure with a steady hand, and got it all wrong anyway. Too much, then too little, then screw it, good enough. The machine clacked to life and started its slow rhythm, that familiar sputter that belongs to mornings and normal people. Steam curled against the cabinet. Spots tracked it with her eyes. She hadn't moved off the couch, just the head pivoting, like a little sentinel daring the air to try something else. I leaned on the counter and waited. A plane crossed somewhere overhead. No, maybe not a plane, maybe my imagination. Probably the building's bones creaking. When the pot was halfway full, I poured. The smell came first, bitter and ordinary, and I wrapped both hands around the mug for the heat. It helped a little. I took a small sip and hissed as it singed my tongue. That helped too. Pain meant the world had rules. See, I told Spots. Caffeine, civilization. We're fine. She didn't blink. I took the mug to the living room, set it on a coaster I never use for anybody else, and dropped onto the couch beside her. She climbed onto my lap, like we hadn't just learned the universe had buttons. I stroked the ridge of her back, my sweatshirt soaked in her damp, gray cold. I forced my eyes to the TV. The last frame it had shown, an anchor with doomed eyebrows, still ghosted there in the dark glass, a negative of concern. I didn't turn it on. I didn't touch the remote. I drank my coffee and gave myself a full minute where nothing at all happened. And then every screen in the apartment turned on. It wasn't the cheerful wake of a device resurrecting. It was a seizure. White rectangles slamming into the darkness at once. The TV, the old tablet on the bookshelf that I hadn't charged since last Christmas, the microwave, the dusty laptop in the bedroom, everything. Spots flinched against me and dug her claws into my thigh. No, I said. The black font hit at the same time across every screen. Aliens or demons? Under the question, a red countdown, digital clock segments bleeding into the white. You have 10 seconds to decide, or the choice will be made for you. 9. The hum rose from nowhere, from everywhere. Not loud, just thorough. 8. I didn't reach for the remote. I reached down under the kitchen table with my foot, trying to hook the phone toward me, and missed. 7. Don't, I told the room. Don't do this. I set it to the TV and to the microwave and to whatever else could hear me. I'm done. 6. Spots let out a low, rusty warning in her throat and slid off my lap, disappearing beneath the couch, like she knew something bad was coming. 5. The light shifted greener by a fraction. Not the color of plants or hospitals, but the color of something made by a thing that had never seen a plant or hospital. I stood without deciding and reeled toward the table, fingers groping for the phone that had slid beyond my reach. 4. My palm found it, the thin smoothness of the glass. 3. I'm not picking demons, I said, and I hated how fast I said it. I hated how ready I sounded. Fine, aliens. My thumb hovered. The red numbers cut another notch. 2. I pressed aliens. The TV cut from white to static. to news. Not one channel, every channel, punched together into a single chorus. Anchors talking over anchors. Cell phone footage, vertical and hurtling. Somewhere, a man sobbing loudly into a microphone. Somewhere, a woman in a reflective vest saying, "This is not a drill," like she'd been given those exact words to say 100 times and never believed them until right now. Breaking. Lights over major U.S. cities. Breaking. Unidentified objects. FAA orders immediate ground stop. Breaking. Contact event. White House to address nation. The feed stuttered, skipped frames, and then the camera that ate up most of the screen belonged to someone on a high-rise building, hands shaking, pointing into a sky that had forgotten how to be dark correctly. The shape there didn't move so much as occupy. A darker dark inside the glow. A giant alien craft. My phone vibrated in my hand. Messages cascaded from names I hadn't seen in years. "You seeing this? Dude, look outside. They're saying it's over Vegas. Wait, no, LA. Wait, it's everywhere." A number I didn't have saved sent a location ping and a text that was just, "Please help me." The anchor cut back in, terrified professionalism failing at the corners. His voice came through my TV, even though the volume had been on mute a moment ago. "Good evening, I'm John Williams. We've been receiving reports of alien crafts, and they appear to be hostile. May God be with us all." The screen went black. I should have closed the blinds. I should have stepped away. Instead, I pressed my forehead to the cool pane and looked out. The light cut down through the window. The hairs on my arms lifted. Dust rose into the beam and hung there, frozen like a constellation. My phone blinked. The survey's plain white space reclaimed the screen, and a new question appeared. Up or down? Underneath, the red numbers starting again. 10. You have 10 seconds to decide. 9. I backed away from the window without meaning to. The pull wasn't physical at first. It was suggestion. And then suggestion became demonstration, and my socks unglued from the floorboards by a half-inch, my coffee mug dragging across the table. 8. "Spots," I said, and I heard my own voice distort. "Spots? Stay." She didn't answer. The couch skirt stirred once and went still. 7. The kitchen towel lifted, corners unfurling. The pot holder slid itself to the edge of the counter, stopped. Somewhere, the fridge motor tried to start and couldn't. 6. It got serious. My heels separated from the ground and didn't return. I grabbed the back of a chair and felt it wanting the ceiling more than it wanted me. 5. "Down," I said. Half prayer, half order. It didn't register anywhere but my own mouth. The beam brightened, and for the first time there was a sound in it. High, thin. The opposite of thunder. 4. Ceiling, floor, ceiling, floor. The room flipped the wrong way. I was maybe 3 feet up. Maybe 30. Couldn't tell. The blinds rattled themselves into an open mouth. The outside wasn't a street anymore. 3. Spots cried once. A small sound. and my brain tried to push me down toward her by sheer loyalty. The body disagreed. 2. The question on the phone didn't change. I jammed my thumb at the screen and missed because the screen slid half an inch away in my own hand. I clenched, got a better grip, forced my finger down. Down, I said, like the word had weight. The number hit 1 as my thumb connected. The light went out. Gravity remembered me then and took me back hard. I hit the bed on my hip and shoulder, bounced once, lost the breath I'd been hoarding. The ceiling overhead was just ceiling again. I lay there and stared upward. "Spots?" I said. My voice came out hoarse. A tremor moved the bedspread, and then a wet, small weight stepped carefully onto my stomach. She was still damp, not dripping anymore, smelling like a penny in the inside of the fish tank. Cautious, but not convinced she needed hiding anymore. She tucked herself into the corner between my ribs and my arm and squeezed, and then started purring. I put my hand on her back. "It's okay, we're down," I said. The phone lay against my other hip, screen angled toward the ceiling. New text had arrived across the same white space. Just one line. "Thank you for your preference." The words hung on the phone's screen. I sat there for a long time, spots pressed against my ribs, both of us breathing in sync. My eyes stung. My head was killing me. Finally, I slid off the bed and stood. My knees popped. The phone slipped from my fingers and landed face down on the blanket, and I didn't pick it back up. "I'm done," I said. "We're done, Spots." The cat followed me as I walked to the living room. The apartment felt like it'd been wrung out and left to dry, air heavy, but it was quiet again. The fridge hummed steadily. The power outside had returned and the aliens seemed to have gone away. Streetlights glowed their usual dull amber, throwing long shadows across the sidewalk. A car rolled past slowly, and I could see people again. I dropped onto the couch, let myself sag into the cushions. My head was killing me. I dug my fingers into my temples and pressed until the pain sharpened, then blurred. My palms smelled like wet fur and coffee. Spots hopped up beside me, tail curling around my forearm. She was mostly dry now, still cool to the touch. I scratched behind her ears. She leaned into it with a small purr, and we both stared at the window. Outside, the world looked like a photograph. Cars in motion, street lamps steady, clouds moving. No beams of light, no aliens, no craziness. I breathed out slowly, almost a laugh. It's over. Spots kneaded the blanket once, then settled with her head on my thigh. I leaned back, eyes half closed, and then my phone buzzed. Not a little notification tick, a full, sustained vibration that resonated through the coffee table. I opened my eyes. The phone lay where I'd left it on the bed. Its glow reflected faintly off the hallway wall. I didn't move at first. My hand stayed on Spots, fingers resting against the back of her neck. She went still too, ears tilting toward the sound. The buzz stopped, then started again. And I stood slowly. Each step toward the bedroom felt heavier, like wading through water. The hall was dim, but the phone's glow was enough to paint a square of light on the floor. It pulsed once, twice. It was waiting. I reached for it with shaky fingers. The screen was white again, but not empty. A new question had appeared. Would you like to share this survey with your friends? Yes or no? My stomach turned. Spots meowed softly from the living room, a sound like a warning. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering. No, I said. No. I tried to tap no, but my hands were shaking. The screen seemed to shift under my thumb. Sweat slicked the glass, and in my panic, my finger slid sideways. A soft chime, and the button yes lit up. I froze. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The glow on the screen dimmed back to normal. My own reflection stared up at me from the glass, pale, hollow-eyed, a black cat sitting behind me. And then the phone vibrated once more, a low, satisfied hum. And on the screen, new words appeared. Thank you for your service.
Hey everyone, Steven here. I hope you enjoyed the story. In case you haven't watched it yet, just so you know, the full Daggerland series is on the channel. It's about 4.5 hours, and I think you'll really like it. So if you haven't finished the Daggerland series and you'd like something to do, check it out. I will try to put a video link on screen. Also, check out our new Daggerland merch at hauntedstuff.com. There's a link in the description. Thank you for listening and all the support, and I hope you have a great weekend. My name is Daniel. I was studying engineering before I started working this warehouse job. I work the night shift now, but my life wasn't always like this. I used to go to school. I like school. I like learning how things worked. Machines, buildings, systems. Made sense for me. If something broke, you could take it apart, figure out why, and fix it. That was comforting. I always liked knowing there was a solution if you just kept looking. I had to leave school during my third year, not because I wanted to, but because life got expensive. My dad got sick. He was in and out of the hospital for months. The treatments were long and cost a lot. Insurance helped, but not enough. We had to cover the rest, and that meant bills, more than we were ready for. My mom worked extra shifts, and I picked up part-time jobs. Eventually, my dad got better. He's doing all right now. He's tired a lot and can't go back to his old job, but he's home. He gardens sometimes. My mom still works too hard, but she doesn't complain. We're lucky, and I know that. Still, by the time things settled down, I was in too deep. The loans from school and the medical bills had piled up. I tried going to class, but I couldn't afford it. The interest alone was more than I could keep up with. I had to choose. Keep studying or start paying. So I started paying. And that's how I ended up here at this warehouse. It's one of the old Amazon fulfillment centers, the kind they don't use much anymore. Most of the shipping's automated these days, but places like this still need hands. People to scan and stack, keep the place running. It's out past the highway, little hard to find unless you know where to look. Half the lights don't work, and the place hums all the time, but it pays steady. They offer a deal. If you live on site, they cover rent and food. Means long shifts, usually 20 hours with short breaks, but no commute, no rent, no extra expenses. That part actually helps. I live in a small unit above the warehouse floor. It's got a bed, a kitchenette, and a tiny, tiny bathroom. It's not much, but it's mine and it's quiet. I don't go out much. Most of the time I'm working or resting. It's not forever, just until I've paid off enough to start again. Maybe I'll go back to school someday. I don't know, maybe I won't. I don't think too far ahead. For now, I've got a plan and I am sticking to it. Then there's my cat Milo. The first night I met Milo, I thought he was a box. He was curled up under my cot, half covered in packing paper, and didn't move when I came in. Just one eye staring back at me in the dark. I almost stepped on him. I thought maybe he was sick or injured, but when I reached down, he growled like he'd been offended. Then he just turned his back on me and went to sleep like he lived here. No collar, no tags, grease on his fur like he'd rolled under a forklift. One eye missing, just a scar where it should be. I tried to carry him out the next day, but he bit my glove and refused to let go. And after that, I gave up, and he stayed. I named him Milo. He doesn't seem to care either way. He's not a regular cat. He doesn't act like a pet. He comes and goes when he wants, shows up around 3 a.m., and disappears again before sunrise. Sometimes he's gone for a day or two, then returns like nothing happened. I don't ask where he's been. He always smells like something different. Burnt rubber, metal shavings, motor oil. Once he smelled like vinegar. I don't even want to know. I made him a little pirate patch for his missing eye. Just a small scrap of cloth with thread. It's stupid, but it kind of suits him. He wears it for a while, then loses it under a rack or in a vent. I make another one when I have time, and he lets me put it on without a fight. I think he likes the attention, even if he pretends not to. He doesn't like loud sounds, though. Hates the scanners. When the forklift beeps, he hides under the shelves. But when I'm sitting still, during breaks or when I'm logging inventory, he comes over and curls up near my foot like a weird little coworker. It's nice having someone around, even if he sheds on my uniforms and scratches the walls. Anyway, the warehouse is huge. Used to be a major Amazon fulfillment center years ago, but now they call it a residential logistics facility. That just means a few of us live here while we work. Most people quit fast. I have stayed the longest. The building's on the edge of a shut-down highway near the edge of town. It's out of the way. No traffic, no sidewalks, just trucks every couple of days dropping off old stock, damaged goods, or unsorted items that never made it out of circulation. I work in the receiving section. I scan packages, unload pallets, sort boxes by type and weight. Some of the stuff looks ancient. Out-of-print books, unopened toys, old batteries that probably don't work. They're not meant to be delivered. This warehouse, it's more like a holding zone, a place where things are forgotten until someone figures out what to do with them. Some packages are so dusty the labels are unreadable. Those go into deep storage, which is just code for pushing them further back down the aisle. The place is cold most of the time. Half the heaters barely work. Some lights never turn off. The floor is made of poured concrete and chews through your boots fast. The machines run quiet, but they're always moving. Belts, lifts, sorting arms. You get used to the motion. You start to recognize each beep and click. You know when something's wrong before it happens. I live on the mezzanine level. The apartment's small, barely enough room to stand in two directions at once. One wall has a cot bolted to it. Next to it is a sink and a hot plate. The bathroom's in a closet behind a sliding door. I keep everything clean, mostly to stay sane. Milo lives here too. Didn't ask him to, but I'm glad he does. Most days I don't say much, but he doesn't seem to need words. He just shows up when he feels like it and leaves when he's done. And that's kind of how life works here.
Most days follow the same pattern: work, sleep, repeat. But not everything in this place fits into a clean routine. There are parts of the warehouse that don't make sense. Rules no one explains, noises no one reports, and moments you're better off not asking about. I have seen things here that don't belong in any manual. I've got a few stories. None of them feel real until you're living them. Story 1. So when I first got here, I thought it'd be simple. I like simple. My debt was a math problem. Numbers going in, numbers going out. The warehouse gave me a way to solve that. No customers, no co-workers, except the ones you barely saw in passing. No uniforms, just a barcode badge and steel-toed boots. All I had to do was show up, follow instructions, and keep moving. There's a rhythm to it. Scan the label, lift the box, move it to the right bin. Repeat. Over time, it becomes automatic. Some people say it gets boring, and yes, it does. But overall, I think it's kind of peaceful. Leaves room to think. On breaks, I read. There are old books hidden all over the warehouse, left behind in crates or forgotten on top of dusty shelves. Sometimes they're stuffed into return boxes, like someone tried to ship out their whole bookshelf and forgot about it. I found a torn-up copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Frankenstein, even a worn copy of Dracula with a coffee ring on the counter. I keep a little pile of mine near my cot. It's kind of like finding treasure. But the first story I remember from here, really remember, was my first day. I showed up at the loading dock around 7 in the morning. Nobody greeted me. The lights were on, and the conveyor belts were humming, but it felt empty. After a while, a man in a yellow vest showed up with a clipboard. He didn't introduce himself, just handed me a plastic badge with my name on it and a laminated rule sheet titled Safety Protocols for After-Hours Employees. There were 12 rules. The first few made sense. Wear your harness when operating lifts. Don't touch exposed wires. Yeah, no kidding. Report spills immediately. But the rest were strange. Do not acknowledge movement in aisle 47 after 2 a.m. If the red light above the freezer turns green, leave immediately. Ignore all pages that end in 0. If something knocks, do not knock back. I thought it was a joke. Or maybe old warehouse superstition, I don't know. Some workers make up rules to scare the new guy. I laughed and asked if there was a second page. The man didn't laugh back. He just told me to sign the back and keep a copy on me at all times. Then he walked off. He trained me for about 3 days. Mostly just showed me how to clock in, scan boxes, and not get crushed by the lifts. He didn't talk much. Seemed tired all the time. Like someone who'd seen too much and decided to care a little less each day. On the 4th day, he didn't show up. I got a message later from the office saying he'd quit, found a better position at a facility in Phoenix, apparently, and I was offered his quarters upstairs. I took them. Meant I didn't have to sleep on the floor near receiving anymore. The locker in the room still had his stuff inside. A clean duffel bag, some work pants, a pack of gum, a toothbrush, and a travel case. It all looked like it'd been packed to go, but then never picked up. Thought maybe he forgot it. There was a note in one of the pants pockets, folded, plain paper. No name, no date. Just 3 words written in blue ink. Don't feed it. I didn't know what that meant. Figured it was another joke. Something left over from the same person who wrote the weird safety rules. That night, Milo started riding on my shoulder. He'd never done it before. He usually walked on his own, slow and careful,
stopping every few steps to sniff or scratch. But that evening, right after my shift, I leaned down to grab my bag, and he jumped up without warning. Just landed there like it was normal. He dug his claws in gently and settled behind my neck like a scarf. I tried to shrug him off. He refused to move, and I gave up. So there I was, tired, sore, a badge still clipped to my shirt, walking back through the warehouse with a one-eyed cat perched on my shoulders and a note in my pocket telling me not to feed something. On the way back, I passed aisle 47. I hadn't noticed it before. It was one of the longer aisles, deep in the rear zone near deep storage. The shelves there are older. Some don't have labels. Some lean sideways, like the bolts gave out years ago. There's a stretch of it where the lights flicker in and out. Maintenance says it's a wiring issue, but they've never fixed it. It was only 9:30 p.m., so I wasn't worried. The weird rule didn't apply until after 2 a.m., according to the sheet. Still, I kept my pace steady and didn't look too long down the aisle. I didn't want to make it a thing. Milo tensed a little on my shoulder when we passed it. Ears back, tail twitching. But he didn't growl or leap down. He just stared. Back at my quarters, I reread the rule sheet. I still have it, actually. It's taped to the inside of my locker now. Sometimes, I look at it just to remember I didn't imagine any of this. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of anything that happened. Nothing did. But because I just couldn't stop thinking about that note. Don't feed it. It didn't say what it was. It didn't say what happened if you did. Just those 3 words. No details, no warning, no signature. Like whoever wrote it assumed I'd already know. I didn't know then, but I figured it out later that week. I met Bill. Well, met is maybe the wrong word. I didn't shake his hand or anything. I just saw him. Or it. I call it Bill now, but I don't know what it really is. It's not a person. Not in the way you and I are people. The first time I saw him, it was near receiving. Around 3 a.m. The lights flicker there sometimes, especially on the south end where the ceiling panels are cracked. I was restocking bins, mostly returns. Boxes marked unsorted. They go in a cart, get scanned, and wait for someone higher up to figure out what to do with them. I just dropped off a crate of old electronics when I noticed movement in the next aisle over. Not just a little movement either. Something big. I thought maybe it was one of the other workers. We don't usually talk much, but people pass through now and then. This figure, though, he was tall, slouched, broad shoulders, but the shape wasn't right. His arms were too long. His head tilted too far forward, like it was too heavy for his neck. He was dragging something behind him. Looked heavy, like a wet sack that left a trail. Thought it might be trash. Sometimes broken returns get tossed out in bulk. But then I heard the scraping. Slow, thick, uneven. Not plastic or cardboard. It sounded like something soft being pulled across concrete. I called out. I don't know why. Just instinct, maybe. I said, "Hey, you good over there?" The shape stopped. Just froze in place. And then, slowly, it turned its head toward me. And that's when the smell hit. It was sharp and sour, like copper and old oil. Something else mixed in. Rotting meat, maybe. It was so strong I nearly gagged. Milo leapt off my shoulder and took off in the other direction, tail down, not making a sound.
The figure stepped back into the shadows between shelves and disappeared. I stood there for a while, not moving, not speaking, until I finally convinced myself I'd imagined most of it. Maybe it was a forklift running without lights. I don't know. Maybe I was just tired. And I kept telling myself that. The next day I asked around. One of the other night guys just shrugged and said the place makes weird sounds. Yeah, it makes weird sounds. You get used to it. Don't go wandering around, he'd said. That was all. So I kept quiet. But I started paying attention. A week later, I found out what Bill eats. It was in section H7, a zone that handles bulk items. I was doing inventory when I found a small crate shoved behind a stack of microwaves. Wasn't labeled, which was already a problem. I opened it to tag it properly, and there it was, a severed monkey hand. Just the hand, cleanly removed, still soft, still warm somehow. I called it in as biohazard waste and filed the report, just like the manual says. But no one ever came to collect it. I checked the logs later. The crate wasn't listed in the system. As far as the records were concerned, it didn't exist. After that, I started calling the thing Bill. It helped somehow. For my own sense of sanity, I guess. The second time I saw Bill, it was worse. I was logging returns on my tablet when I felt like something was off. Milo had stopped walking. He was staring straight ahead, ears flat, tail puffed out. I followed his gaze and saw it. Bill, standing perfectly still between the racks. His head was tilted again, too far to one side. His arms hung loosely at his sides. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the shape was wrong. Like someone had stretched a human face over something that did not fit. The skin didn't line up with the features. No real eyes. Just dark spots where eyes should be. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. Milo growled low in his throat, and then turned and bolted again. When I looked back, Bill was gone. That night, I dug into the warehouse system on my laptop. We're not really supposed to use it for personal research, but I was curious. I searched employee logs, check-in times, departure records. I noticed something strange. Almost every after-hours worker had a short record. None lasted longer than 3 months. Some files ended suddenly. No exit interviews, no transfer logs. Just a line of code marking their last scan-in, and then nothing. Even the guy who trained me, his name was buried under a number tag. No forwarding address, just a blank ending. And that's when I started to worry a little bit. This place wasn't just weird, it was more than that. The manual had a section buried in the back. It's not printed like the others. Just a scanned page added later. It says, if employee is exposed to redacted, advise continued operation and monitoring. Containment optional. Protocol priority. Uninterrupted function. There was no context, no explanation. I read it twice, then again. Didn't change. I didn't tell anyone. I sat on my cot later that night with Milo curled up beside me. I scratched him behind the ears, even though he'd left me. He purred like always, calm and warm. I looked at him and said, "And we're not getting out of here for a while, huh, buddy?" He just kept purring. There's a red door in the back corridor, past Section D. I walk by it sometimes during my night shifts, usually around 3 a.m. It's tucked behind a row of broken vending machines and a stack of crates nobody's touched in months. Most people don't even go back there. The hallway is narrow and dim, with no cameras and no working lights overhead. The motion sensors don't respond. I've checked. The door doesn't have a label. No scanner, no company logo. Just smooth red paint. The kind of red that's weird. Too bright, in a place where everything else is beige or gray. It has a metal handle. No lock, though. It's never locked. Management said it was old storage. Sealed off for safety reasons, they told me. Something about unstable shelving or loose wiring inside. Nothing worth clearing out. Nothing I needed to worry about. Just log your time and stick to your zones, they said. But every night, almost exactly at 3:17 a.m., Bill stands in front of it. Always the same. Same spot, same posture, facing the door, not moving. Sometimes I see him as I turn the corner. Scares the hell out of me. He's already there. Other times, I see him walking down the hall toward it, dragging something I can't quite make out. He never opens the door. He just stands there. One night, I passed through a few minutes later than usual. Bill was still there. As I got closer, I heard something I hadn't heard before. Knocking. Not loud, just soft, rhythmic knocks. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. Like someone was on the other side. The sound didn't echo like it should have. It sounded close, like it was coming from inside the metal. I stopped walking. Milo stiffened on my shoulder. And then the knocking stopped. Later, when I asked the warehouse system about the red door, nothing came up. No blueprint data. No room ID. I ran a search on storage clearance zones and found nothing matching the area. It wasn't listed as active or inactive. It wasn't listed at all. And that's when I remembered something my dad used to say. When I was little, he'd tell me scary stories before bed. Not the nice kind with lessons, just strange ones. About forests with no paths, and things that lived in abandoned attics. His favorite was a line he repeated every time the story got too quiet. Stay away from the red things. Red's the only color monsters can see. That's why they like blood. He used to say. Kinda dark, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I always thought he was joking. Now I'm not so sure. One night, about 2 months into working here, I found the door open slightly. Just an inch. Barely noticed. I hadn't seen Bill yet that shift. Milo and I had just finished sorting a double load of small electronics. I was walking my usual loop, checking barcodes and updating inventory. When I reached the corridor, I saw it. The door opened just a crack. There was light coming from inside. Not the kind of light you'd expect. Wasn't white or yellow. It was red. A deep, steady red. Like the glow inside an oven, I thought. It didn't flicker or shift. It just stayed right there, bright and heavy. I stopped walking. Milo climbed down off my shoulders. He walked up to the door slowly, then stopped 2 feet away. His little ears went back. His tail lowered. He stared at that gap in the door like it was alive. I looked at him. Should I check it out? I asked. Milo didn't move. He just kept staring. I took a step forward.
He turned to me and made a short, low sound, like a warning. He looked upset. I stared at the door, at the light, at the sliver of space between the frame and the door where I could almost see the edge of something inside. I looked down at Milo again. It wasn't moving. Yeah, good idea. Maybe don't go into the creepy red room, I said. I reached out and pulled the door closed. It clicked shut without any resistance, and the light disappeared. I stood there for a moment, hand on the handle, waiting to see if anything would happen. Milo brushed against my leg and walked away as if to say, "Let's go." And I followed. I haven't opened the door since then. It's still unlocked. I check sometimes just to see. It never changes. No matter what time of day, no matter what I'm doing, the red door is always there. Unmarked, undocumented, waiting. And most nights, Bill still visits it. I don't know what's behind it. I don't think I want to know. Then, there was the first time I had to get something from the basement. The order came in just after midnight. I was logging returns on the main floor when a red notification popped up on my tablet. Retrieve Unit 84A, sub-level storage. No other info. Just the item number, location, and an urgent flag next to it. I'd never been in the basement before. Only authorized personnel were supposed to access that level. That's what the manual said. But when I scanned my keycard at the stairwell door, it unlocked with a beep like any other zone. I waited a second before going down. Milo wasn't with me that night. He'd wandered off a few hours earlier and hadn't come back yet. I usually try not to work in unfamiliar areas without him, but I figured it'd be a quick grab. In and out, right? The stairs creaked as I went down. There were no lights at first, just the narrow beam from my flashlight and the dim green arrows painted on the concrete walls. The deeper I went, the colder it got. Not normal cold, basement cold. The kind that feels like it's been sitting there for years untouched. Sub-level storage was quiet. The air was thick with dust. I could smell rust and something else, like salt. The walls were lined with heavy shelves, stacked with unmarked crates, old machines, broken vending parts, and boxes with no barcodes. I followed the map on my tablet until I found the row marked 84. Then I followed the numbers up until I reached 84A. And that's when I saw him. Bill. He was standing in front of the shelf. Same as always. Slouched, long-armed, way too tall. But this time he wasn't still. He was chewing. At first I couldn't tell what it was. I thought maybe an old mop or a piece of rubber tubing. But then I saw the shape. The curve of a rib. The bend of an arm. The meat was red and soft, and clearly not food. Whatever it had been, animal, person, it wasn't anymore. Bill's face was covered in something dark. His jaw moved slowly, like it wasn't used to the motion. His eyes caught the light from my flashlight. They didn't look human. They reflected like an animal's eyes do in the dark. I didn't breathe. I just crouched down behind a crate and waited. The crate I needed, Unit 84A, was sitting right there, just behind him on the second shelf. A small gray box sealed with 2 plastic straps. I looked around and saw a small bolt on the floor near my foot. Looked like it'd fallen off a shelf bracket. I picked it up and waited.
Then I threw it. I aimed for the far side of the aisle, behind a pile of broken office chairs. The bolt hit metal and made a sharp clang. The sound echoed through the basement like a fire alarm. Bill stopped chewing. He turned slowly toward the sound, his body moving in pieces. First his head, then his torso, and then his legs, like a puppet remembering which way to walk. He started to move. At first he was slow, but then he sped up, jerky, unsteady steps that grew faster as he picked up speed. I stayed real low and didn't look back. I grabbed the box, hugged it tight to my chest, and moved the opposite way down the aisle. I reached the stairs without looking behind me, and the door at the top was still open. I climbed 2 steps at a time. By the time I made it back to my apartment, I was shaking. I put the box on the counter and locked the door behind me. I didn't open it. I still haven't opened it. There's no record of what was inside. I don't want to know. Later that week, I checked the warehouse map again. Sub-level storage wasn't just 1 floor. According to the old plans, there are 3 more levels below that one. No access routes listed. No descriptions. Just blank gray squares with faint outlines of staircases that don't appear on any current layout. I don't like basements anymore, and I do not want to know what's down there. Well, that's all the stories I have, for now anyway. I didn't really set out to keep track of them. At first I just worked, slept, fed Milo, and kept my head down. But the weird stuff started stacking up, and I figured it was worth writing down. Not because anyone asked, but because somebody probably should. This place doesn't come with warning signs that make sense. Just laminated sheets and vague rules that nobody ever really explains. You learn fast or you disappear. That's just how it is. I've been here just under 8 months now. They pay well enough I've managed to pay off a chunk of that debt. I keep a little chart on my wall with how much I've got left. I cross off another chunk every 2 weeks. And it feels good, seeing those numbers go down. If everything goes according to plan, I've got 4 more months before I can leave. I think I'm going to go back to school. I already started looking at programs. I'm thinking structural engineering again. Maybe something with design this time. Something practical, but I don't know, creative. I don't know. I just want to work on something that doesn't breathe heavy in the dark or knock from the wrong side of the wall. And yes, don't worry, I'm taking Milo with me. He's not much for conversation. He's reliable. The little one-eyed cat still sleeps by the door, still disappears for hours, and comes back smelling like power tools. He has a little box now, a blanket, and about 5 identical pirate eye patches that I keep sewing because he keeps losing them. I think he knows when I'm stressed. He sits on my laptop when I stay up too late reading logs. Sometimes he curls up on my chest until I shut it off. He's coming with me when I go. That's not even a question. Until then, I keep doing my job. I keep my eyes open. I stay away from aisle 47 after 2 a.m. I don't respond to paging numbers that end in 0. I make sure my key card still works every day, just in case the door decides to stop letting me out. There are still things I don't understand about this place, lots of them, like what's really behind that red door, or how many other Bills are wandering around the deeper levels. But I don't need every answer. Some things are better left closed. Anyway, if you ever find yourself working in a place like this, somewhere quiet, underlit, just past the edge of town, remember a few things. Stay away from red doors. Stay out of basements, especially ones that weren't in the original building plans. Don't go near Section D unless you absolutely have to.
And most importantly, don't feed Bill.
Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night.
I've been fixing elevators for more than 20 years. Long enough to know that nobody thinks about them until they stop working. That's when the calls come in. Middle of the night, middle of the day, doesn't matter. Someone gets stuck between floors, doors won't open, car lurches half a foot past the landing. People think it's boring work, and it's not. You crawl down black shafts where one wrong step can kill you. You lean over live power, motors big enough to rip your arms off if you're careless. And then there's the people you call out. Drunks, cheaters, panic attacks, once even a dead body. But nothing unexplainable. Not until last month. The call came through dispatch around 10 at night. Old place, the CP Hotel, right off I-90 in Ohio. They didn't say much, just elevator stuck, doors opening when they shouldn't. Vague, but, nothing I hadn't heard before. I loaded my kit into the truck and hit the highway. Rolled past the exit sign for Daggerland and kept on going past. I heard some strange stories about that place. Something that happened there a while back. Something about a guy named Winners, I think, and some dog. Probably made up. You know how urban legends are. Anyway, that's not the story for today. The CP Hotel was easy enough to spot. 14 stories of brick and grime, with a neon sign that buzzed and spat sparks. The P in CP was burned out, so it just glowed C Hotel into the night. Inside, the carpet smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. A chandelier buzzed overhead, one bulb fighting to stay alive. At the front desk sat a man who looked like he'd been there for 50 years. Thin, greasy comb-over plastered across his scalp. Glasses so thick, they made his eyes swim behind them. He blinked at me, slow and long, like I'd woken him from a nap. "Yes?" he said. I got a call for a repair," I said, setting my toolbox down. He didn't answer, just raised one shaky finger and pointed down a long, dim hallway. At the far end waited the elevator. Its dented steel doors were tarnished. It looked old. The hallway stretched longer than it looked. My boots sank into carpet that had gone soft with age. The sconces along the walls flickered, throwing shadows that leaned the wrong way. I kept walking, toolbox heavy in my hand, and the hum grew louder, a steady mechanical thrum threaded with little pops and clicks, like something chewing. Up close, the doors were worse. Rust freckles spotted the steel. The seams were black with grease. The call button plate was brass, worn to green at the edges, the up arrow glowing with a weak, pulsing light. I set the toolbox down and pressed the button. The click was sluggish, delayed, like the switch didn't want to admit I'd touched it. Somewhere above, the motor coughed alive. The cables sang faintly in their housing. The doors stuttered open 3 inches, slammed shut again, then groaned wide with a judder that rattled the frame. Inside, the cab waited. Wood paneling cracked and peeling, carpet curling at the corners, 2 fluorescent tubes in the ceiling buzzing like hornets. A fan grill, thick with gray fur, wheezed. I didn't step in yet. First rule, make it talk to you before you climb in. I crouched, ran my flashlight along the sill. Track was packed with grit and gum. Rollers had flat spots worn into them. That explained the stutter. I pressed door close with my knuckle. The panels dragged, coughed, but sealed shut. I pressed door open. Same stutter.
I stood listening. The motor hummed a low note through the wall, brake pads squealing faintly. I keyed open the service panel. Dust puffed out, carrying the sour smell of old wiring. Cloth-wrapped harnesses, brittle insulation, contactors spotted with corrosion. No popped fuses, no scorch. Huh. I looked it back up, straightened. "All right, let's see how you run," I muttered. I stepped into the cab, and the doors slammed shut on their own before I touched a thing. The cab jolted hard enough to knock my teeth together. The indicator needle above the door twitched, hesitated, then began to climb. I hadn't pressed a button. The motor wailed and pulled us higher. At least it works, I thought. The car shuddered to a stop. The brake caught too soft, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to hold, and the doors creaked open. Balloons drifted lazily into the cab, strings brushing my arm. Beyond, a hotel conference room stretched wide. Streamers drooped from thumbtacks, paper faded and torn. A folding table sagged under the weight of a sheet cake. The frosting shone under the light. The words, "Happy Birthday, Tommy," bleeding blue into the white. A circle of children sat waiting in mismatched chairs, paper hats tilted, dresses and shirts rumpled. One girl tilted her head. "Sit," she said. My knees bent on their own. The chair groaned under me. A boy with freckles slowly cut into the cake. The knife squeaked through hardened frosting. He served me a slice on a paper plate. I didn't touch it, but they did. At first, small, neat bites, then bigger, louder. Cake and frosting stuffed into mouths too wide. Wet chewing filled the room. Giggles bubbled up beneath it, light and sweet, but wrong. One boy shoved both hands into a slice and crammed it in, knuckles scraping his teeth. His gums peeled back too far, exposing an extra row of teeth crowding in pale and sharp. A girl bent her head and licked the icing directly off the plate, her tongue long and forked at the end. The giggles turned to cackling, frosting spraying, eyes rolling. Their faces stretched, cheeks ballooning, features slipping into something monstrous. Every head snapped toward me all at once, and I bolted. Toolbox smacked against my leg as I staggered back into the cab. My hand slammed close, 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 until the doors obeyed. The last glimpse I caught was of the cake, sagging, bubbling. The door shut, and the cab jerked upward. My toolbox banged against the rail with a hollow clang. I clutched the bar, breathing hard. Sweat ran down my temples, even though the cab was cool again. "What the hell was that?" I said to myself. I'd seen some weird stuff on this job. Drunks passed out on the floor. Guy who thought an elevator was a good place to shoot up. Even a dead guy once, sitting propped against the wall like he had just fallen asleep. But this? Kids. A whole room of kids waiting for me like I'd been invited to a birthday party. Eating cake until their jaws cracked and their faces slid into something else. That wasn't a glitch. That wasn't bad wiring or a sticky relay. That was... No. I shook my head hard, trying to rattle the thought out. Elevators don't open onto whatever the hell that was. A hotel conference room gone rotten? A memory and a dream? I looked at the control panel. Dead. Every button dark. My reflection in the middle plate looked washed out, eyes too wide. The motor above groaned. The car kept climbing, like it had a destination in mind. I muttered to myself, half out loud, "Don't lose it. Don't lose it. Just figure it out. Find the problem. Fix it. That's the job." But deep down, I knew this wasn't something a wrench or a breaker reset was going to fix. The indicator needle trembled, skipped past numbers, and froze. The brake caught with a greasy squeal, and the doors shuddered open. Heat slammed into me, the kind that steals your breath before you can even curse. It rolled into the cab in waves, carrying the stink of scorched metal and something wetter, like a butcher's shop fire. The floor beyond wasn't hotel carpet. It was an industrial cavern. Steel beams towered overhead, rust running in streaks down their sides. The concrete underfoot gleamed black, slick with something I didn't know. And lining the walls, furnaces. Massive, square-mouthed things big enough to swallow cars. Their doors hung open, spewing fire so bright it burned my eyes. Conveyor belts clanked and screeched their way toward those fires, and on them lay shapes, human shapes, piled like trash. The belts dragged them forward, jerking, squealing, until they tipped into the flames, and they screamed. Not together, not in unison, but in a chorus of panicked, cut-short cries, pleading, shrieking, one after another. Figures worked the belts, tall, crooked things, their arms too long, their bodies stooped. Their hands dragged sparks from the metal as they walked. They bent, picked up the slack bodies when the belts jammed, and tossed them into the fire like broken mannequins. I couldn't move. The heat blistered my skin, and I still couldn't move. Then one of them stopped. Slowly. Its head turned toward me. It dropped the body it was holding. The thud echoed across the chamber. And then it started walking. Another stopped, turned, and then walked right toward me. The furnace behind them roared louder, flames leaping out, like it was reaching for me. I staggered back into the cab, toolbox banging against my knee. My hand hammered the close button again and again. One of the things reached the threshold, and one long arm curled around the frame. The door shuddered, groaned, began to push against it. The thing leaned in, and then a sharp break. The arm folded, yanked back, and the door slammed shut. The cab rattled violently, as if something outside had struck it. The motor screamed, and it dragged me upward again. The cab rattled, shivering like it was about to come loose from the cables. I staggered against the wall, breathing ragged, the stink of scorched steel and burned flesh still choking my nose. "I gotta get out," I muttered. I gotta get out of here." I spun on the panel, jabbing every button. Lobby, close, open, 2, 3, 4, anything. Nothing lit. Nothing answered. My thumb jammed the emergency stop so hard it left a dent. Dead. The motor above groaned, dragging me higher anyway. I cursed, yanking open the service panel with shaking hands. Dust puffed out. Wires twisted in brittle bundles. I grabbed a breaker switch and slammed it down. Sparks spit, but the hum kept on. Come on, I said. But the car didn't even hesitate. I thought about the hatch, climbing out, hauling myself onto the roof. But if it moved while I was up there, no, that was a death wish. I gripped the rail again. Every nerve screamed at me to do something. But there was nothing to do. The cab wasn't mine anymore. The indicator needle trembled, stuttered, then froze. The brake screeched, and the doors began to open. For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something that almost looked normal. An exit sign glowed just across the hall, buzzing faintly. Below it, a plain gray metal door with a crash bar. The little Running Man stencil pointed down towards safety. Relief surged through me. Thank God, I muttered, toolbox swinging at my side as I stumbled out. My legs felt weak, knees threatening to give, but I kept moving. The bar clicked easily under my hand, and the door pushed open with a heavy groan. Stairs. That's what I expected. The sharp echo of concrete steps, the cold smell of a service stairwell. Instead, there was nothing. Blackness stretched beyond the frame. Not the dark of an unlit stairwell. This was thicker. The light from the hallway stopped flat against it, like it hit a wall. I leaned closer, heart hammering, and then I saw them. Eyes. Tiny, burning red points, thousands of them. Pinpricks scattered deep into the dark, so far away they could have been stars. But they weren't stars. They blinked, all at once, and then they started moving. The red pinpricks drew closer. Pairs began to line up, rising higher than my head, lowering close to the ground, weaving through each other like predators in a pack. The sound came next. A low, rolling scrape, like claws dragging across stone, and then breathing. Dozens of lungs sucking air all at once. My whole body locked up. My hands stayed on the crash bar, frozen. The eyes surged forward. And that broke me. I yanked my hand back, slammed the door shut, and bolted. Toolbox banging against my thigh, I sprinted for the elevator like a man running for his life. The cab doors were still open, and I dove inside, hammered the close button with both fists. The last thing I saw through the narrowing gap was the stairwell door bulging outward, rattling on its hinges, the glow of red eyes pressing outward. The door sealed. The cab jolted violently, and the motor above screamed. Upward. The cab rattled like it was coming apart. My lungs felt like they'd shrunk to half size, every breath short and ragged. I clutched the rail, forehead pressed to the cold wood paneling. My whole body shook. I can't do this, I said. I gotta get out. I have to get out. The button stared back at me, lifeless. I slammed my fist against them once, twice, until my knuckles burned, but nothing lit. Nothing answered. I yanked at the service panel again, half crazed. Jiggle breakers, flip switches. Sparks snapped, bit my fingers, but the motor above only growled louder, like it was laughing. The indicator needle jittered, skipping numbers. The fan in the ceiling wheezed, then gave a single hiccup. And then the ringing started. At first it was faint, then another, until it wasn't faint at all. Until the sound of ringing telephones filled the air, leaking through the cracks of the door, so loud it set my teeth on edge. The cab shuddered to a stop, and the doors creaked open. The ringing started faint, then swelled into a roar. By the time the cab doors creaked open, it was all I could hear. The hallway stretched forever, and both walls were lined with rotary phones, cords stiff with age. Every 4 feet, another one. Every single receiver trembled on its cradle as it rang. I stepped out, toolbox dangling from my hand, ears buzzing from the sheer noise. The closest one rang sharp and shrill, louder than the rest, and against every instinct, I lifted the receiver. Dogs. A pack of them. Snarling, barking, claws skittering against hardwood floors. The sound hit me in the gut, vivid and wrong. I could smell them, could feel the panic of being 10 years old again, trapped in a neighbor's yard. Hot breath snapping at my skin. This isn't real, I muttered, and I slammed the receiver back down. The next one rang louder. My hand moved before I could stop it. Voices, whispering, layered, like 100 conversations happening at once. I caught fragments. Going up. Don't step down 13th. Watch the doors. All tumbling over each other. I dropped the phone, let it swing wild on its cord until it smacked against the wall. Another rang. I snatched it up like it might save me. Yeah, police department. The man's voice. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Oh, thank God. Listen, I'm at the CP Hotel. The elevator's gone crazy. I don't know what floor I'm on. All right, calm down, sir, the officer said. We'll send someone there right away, okay? Just need your information first. Yeah, anything, yeah. All right, date of birth? Yeah, sure, March 9th, 1984, I said without thinking. Silence. Then the man chuckled. 1984, huh? Very funny, sir. 20 years went by just like that, huh? I frowned. What are you? But the line clicked. Dead air hissed back at me. I pulled the phone from my ear. The cord was cracked, stiff. Dust coated the mouthpiece. The receiver slipped from my fingers. I didn't even hang it up. Another phone rang. I froze. And I knew the voice that answered. Hey. My stomach dropped. It was him. The bully. The kid who'd made my life hell in grade school. The one who'd shoved me out of a second-floor window while I screamed. Left me with a broken leg and a grin on his face. The one who died years later in a car crash. You saw it, didn't you? The furnace, yeah, you did. That's where you're going. My grip went slick. You're not leaving, you little pansy. You'll stay here with me. Hey, I'm coming to visit. I yanked the receiver away and nearly threw it. Every phone in the hall started ringing louder. The sound built into a teeth-rattling roar, bells slamming against metal, cords twitching like snakes. I thought about the elevator, about going back in. But another thought wormed in. Maybe I don't have to. The telephones were unbearable, yes, but at least they weren't flames. At least there weren't monsters here. If I stayed here, then maybe. And then the phone directly in front of me convulsed. The casing cracked down the middle. The rotary dial warped. With a sickening lurch, the whole unit ripped free of the wall and hit the floor with a heavy thud. It grew. metal warped, cords thickening into veiny cables. The receiver split in half, jaw-like, opening wide, and in seconds, it loomed taller than me. A giant telephone, its open mouth dripping spittle, clacking its teeth together with bone-shaking force. The sound rang through the hall. Sparks flew from its jaws. The thing lurched forward on tangled cords, receiver jaws opening wider, wider. The air quaked with each bite. I screamed and staggered back, toolbox clattering. My eyes darted up and down the hall, searching for a door, a vent, anything. But there was nothing. Just more phones, all of them ringing. The massive jaw lunged. Teeth slammed shut inches from my head. I bolted. The cab still waited open, like it'd known I was running back. I dove inside, hammering the close button again until my thumb went numb. The giant telephone slammed against the doors as they sealed, the chomp reverberating through the cab. Then silence. The car trembled. The motor above screamed, and it began to rise. The cab rattled, groaning like the cables above were grinding through bone. My stomach swooped. The brake caught with a sound like tearing metal. The doors shuddered open. Cold air poured in. Not the recycled chill of air conditioning. This was raw. A winter bite that sank into my skin and scraped my lungs with every breath. I flinched back, then leaned forward again, because what I was seeing couldn't be real. Snow. It drifted down from the ceiling. Flakes spiraled lazily in the yellow glow of the cab light before vanishing into the endless white beyond. The floor stretched into an open, barren expanse of snow, rolling and uneven. No walls, no corners, no end. Just white ground under a high gray ceiling that should have belonged outside. My breath plumed, vapor curling in front of me before fading into the haze. I stepped out. My boots sank into powder with a crunch. Behind me, the elevator hummed, its doors staying open like they were daring me to come crawling back. I turned once, my footprints already blurred, half filled by the falling flakes. A breeze tugged at my sleeves. It was there, cold, damp, carrying scents I hadn't smelled in decades. And then, "Come out." My chest seized. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. It was him. The bully. Not just any kid, the kid. The one who turned my childhood into a gauntlet. The one who'd cornered me behind the school dumpsters, shoved my face into the dirt until I couldn't breathe, laughed when I was crying. The one who once pushed me out of that second-story window just to watch my leg snap like a twig. He was dead. I knew he was dead. A car crash took him years ago. I'd seen the memorial flowers tied to a telephone pole. But his voice was alive here. The exact tone he'd used when I was hiding and he was circling closer. I dropped low into the snow, pressing myself against a drift. My breath fogged the air. Crunch. Footsteps. He emerged from the haze. Taller now. Older. But unmistakable. His shoulders were broader, his face harder. But the grin was the same. An axe swung loose in his hand, blade dulled and notched, but heavy enough to split me in two. He trudged across the snow with the slow, easy rhythm of someone who knows he's already won. He whistled.
Where are you?
I hated that song. Same damn whistle he used when he stalked me after school. Back when I was small enough to fit in lockers, and gullible enough to think hiding behind a teacher's car would save me. The sound slithered through the snowfall. Off key. I clenched my jaw. He dragged the axe behind him, carving a line through the snow. Boots sank deep, leaving craters that filled slowly as flakes piled in. He paused, tilted his head, listening.
I can hear you.
I froze so hard my knees screamed. I crawled forward, each movement deliberate. My eyes darted across the white emptiness, desperate. There's gotta be a way out. But there wasn't. No doors, no walls, not even exit signs or stairwells. Just the endless white, and the bully stalking it with his axe and his whistle. Then I saw it, half buried under snow, 30 feet ahead. A square iron hatch, rusted and warped, set flush into the ground. A bent handle jutted from it. I crept faster, boots crunching, breath ragged in my ears. Hey, there you are. My blood froze. I whipped around. He was closer than I'd realized. The axe was already rising, snow sprang off the blade. He looked down at me.
Hey, don't worry, okay? It'll be quick. You remember when I pushed you from that window?
Quick, right?
Well, it'll be like that, except with an axe. Hey, you're gonna like it here.
I lunged, slipping, clawing at the hatch handle. My glove stuck to the frozen metal, but it shrieked open. I dove headfirst into the dark just as the axe came down. Metal clanged. Sparks spit across the snow as the blade bit the rim of the hatch. And then I was gone. The chute swallowed me whole. I slid fast, shoulders slamming into dented steel, sparks flaring where the toolbox scraped ahead of me. The walls were slick with something. Frost, grease, I couldn't tell, and my arms pinwheeled helplessly. It twisted, sharp turns, impossible angles, as though the chute was folding in on itself. My stomach lurched, my throat locked in a silent scream. Snow clung to me, melting icy trails down my back. My breath whipped past me, sucked away into the dark. I seemed to fall forever, and then I hit something soft. I sank into mountains of fabric, yellowed sheets, scratchy wool blankets, uniforms so old their patches had peeled. I scrambled to my knees. Dust erupted around me in gray clouds. My flashlight shook in my trembling hand, beam slicing through the haze. The basement stretched wide and low. Ceiling pipes dripped rust. Every inch of space was filled with sagging piles of linen. I spun in circles, beam cutting across shadows. My heart jackhammered. I expected to see a monster lunge out, or a pair of red eyes blink open in the dark. But there was nothing. No movement. No sound but the slow settling of cloth and the rasp of my own breath. The quiet was worse. I forced myself upright, boots crunching through fabric that should have been soft but broke like paper. Each step sank, left prints that filled back in as the pile slumped, like the linen wanted to bury me alive. I pushed forward, toolbox bumping my thigh, eyes darting for escape. And then I saw it. A door. Half buried under a collapsed heap of blankets, its outline just visible. I clawed my way through the mound,
sending dust spiraling. My hand found the knob, tarnished brass, cold, but solid. I twisted. The latch clicked, and light spilled in. Warm, normal light. The hallway stretched before me, carpet and wallpaper exactly as when I first arrived. Chandeliers glowed overhead. The mildew smell crept back into my nose, sharper now, but it was comforting. I stumbled forward, half dazed. My boots left damp patches on the carpet. My arm dragged along the wallpaper to steady myself. At the end of the hall was the desk. The concierge sat there, same slick comb-over, same bottle-fed glasses. He hadn't moved an inch. He looked up as I staggered close, face calm, lips curling faintly. "Well?" My throat locked. I doubled over the counter and vomited, choking, retching until my vision blurred. The man nodded, slow and patient. "I understand," he said. I wiped my mouth on my sleeve, chest heaving. My whole body trembled. I didn't say anything. I turned and staggered through the front doors, and I walked out into the night. My van sat under the flickering sign, CP Hotel, the P buzzing faint, threatening to die. I climbed in, peeled off my uniform shirt, and tossed it onto the passenger seat. It slumped there like a body. I gripped the wheel, staring at the empty road. For a moment, thought about going home, calling dispatch, pretending I could file this under malfunction. But then I thought about Amish country. Place without elevators. No cables. No panels that light up on their own. Place where the only thing that rises is the sun. Where you climb ladders to haylofts instead of crawling into humming metal boxes at 3 a.m. I left once. Ha ha. I'm moving to Amish country. And then I turned the key. The van rumbled alive. And I drove.